Elijah Meyer was still holding the pen when Hunter laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. That would have been easier. It was one short breath through his nose, followed by a look at Morgan across the conference table. The two of them had spent the morning dividing Julia Meyer's life into useful parts. The house went to Morgan. Most of the savings went between them. Hunter had already measured the house lot against two nearby parcels he hoped to sell to a developer. Then Elijah had been offered his choice. He could take $6,000 and sign away any further interest in Julia's estate. Or he could take the greenhouse parcel outside Guthrie, with its broken roof, fallen frames, weeds, and whatever it cost to remove the wreckage. Elijah chose the greenhouse. Hunter leaned back in his chair. "You're serious?" "Yes." Morgan stopped arranging the papers in front of her. At 36, she had a way of making every room feel like it was behind schedule. "Elijah, take a minute." "I did." "You looked at the photographs?" "I've been there. Not recently." Elijah placed the pen beside the signature line. He was 25, though Morgan still spoke to him, as if a responsible adult might arrive and take his place. He looked toward the window. The attorney's office was on the second floor, above a tax service in downtown Guthrie. Across the street, a delivery driver was dragging boxes through the back door of a restaurant. It was a normal Wednesday morning. People were buying lunch supplies while Julia's family decided what remained of her. The attorney, Mr. Bell, turned the photographs around. He had already explained that the parcel was separate from Julia's house. It sat beyond Cedar Ridge Road, where the ground dipped behind a line of cottonwoods. The main greenhouse had partially collapsed during a winter storm. One end wall still stood. So did a cinder block workroom attached to the south side. The photographs made it look worse than Elijah remembered. Bent roof ribs lay across broken benches. Clouded plastic sheeting hung in strips. Honeysuckle had climbed through the eastern frame and pulled two sections sideways. The workroom door was still there, though the lower half had swollen from rain. Morgan tapped the nearest picture. "This isn't a gift. It's a demolition bill. That's why Grandma gave him a choice," Hunter said. Morgan glanced at him. She didn't like his tone, but she didn't disagree. Mr. Bell folded his hands. To be precise, Mrs. Meyer directed that Elijah receive either the cash settlement or the greenhouse parcel. The decision is his. "And if he takes the parcel?" Morgan asked. "The deed transfers to him when the estate filing is completed. No later claims?" "Not from this choice." Morgan looked at Elijah again. She wanted a clean answer more than she wanted him protected. Elijah understood that much. She had spent the week after Julia's funeral collecting keys, canceling services, and making lists. Grief had made her more organized, not less. Every unfinished matter seemed to offend her. Hunter had a different reason for watching him. At 32, he earned his living putting land into packages that looked more valuable together than apart. Julia's house lot bordered one of those possible packages. The greenhouse parcel didn't touch the house, but it sat close enough to Cedar Ridge Road to complicate any larger plan if a buyer wanted access or utilities. Hunter picked up one photograph. "There's probably asbestos in that workroom." "There isn't," Elijah said. "You don't know that?" "Grandma had the ceiling replaced." "When?" 4 years ago. Hunter lowered the photograph. He hadn't known. That gave Elijah one small thing in a room where Morgan and Hunter seemed to know everything. Morgan rubbed the side of her thumb against a paper clip. The cash could cover a deposit on an apartment. "I have an apartment." "You rent a room over a garage. It's still an apartment. It's temporary." Elijah nearly smiled at that. Morgan had no idea how long a temporary place could last when no one told you to leave. He'd entered foster care with one black trash bag and a winter coat that didn't belong to him. He had lived in 6 homes after that, some decent, some not, and learned never to spread his belongings across more than one drawer. At 19, while working afternoons at a feed store, he'd met Julia because she came in every Friday and argued about potting mix. She asked questions without making them sound like tests. Within a month, she knew he was taking night classes in equipment repair. Within 2, she'd hired him to fix a greenhouse fan that hadn't worked since the previous summer. He repaired the fan. Julia fed him a tomato sandwich and sent him home with 3 jars of pickled beans. She never asked him to call her grandma. That happened later, after she introduced him to a nursery customer by saying, "This is my grandson Elijah. He can fix anything except his habit of skipping breakfast." Morgan had been standing close enough to hear. She corrected Julia after the customer left. He's not actually your grandson. Julia wiped soil from her hands. I know who he is. Nothing more was said that day. Now Julia was gone, and Morgan had her house. Hunter had his share of the money. Elijah had been offered enough cash to make leaving convenient. Mr. Bell slid the election form toward him. You don't need to decide this morning. Yes, he does, Hunter said. We have a buyer waiting on the other land. Morgan's head turned. Hunter, what? We do. Mr. Bell looked over his glasses. Your proposed transaction isn't part of Elijah's decision. It affects timing. It doesn't change his rights. Hunter lifted both hands and sat back. Fine. Elijah read the two choices again. $6,000 sounded large when spoken aloud. After the room deposit, his truck repair, and the balance on his training loan, most of it would disappear. The greenhouse could take money for years. It might never give anything back. But he knew the smell of that place after Julia watered the beds. He knew which window stuck in damp weather. He knew she kept peppermint tea in a dented tin above the workroom sink. Once, during a bad month when his landlord sold the building and his job cut hours, Julia had given him the workroom key. There's a cot, she'd said. Don't make a ceremony out of it. He stayed 9 nights. She never asked when he planned to leave. She only knocked before entering. Elijah picked up the pen. Morgan's voice softened. You don't owe her this. He looked at her. I didn't say I did. Then why choose it? Because Julia had never introduced him as a foster kid. Because the workroom was the only place where a closed door had meant privacy instead of punishment. Because $6,000 would be spent by Winter, and the greenhouse would still exist under someone else's name. He didn't trust the room with any of that. I want the parcel, he said. Hunter looked at Morgan again. This time he didn't laugh. Elijah signed. Mr. Bell witnessed the form, made copies, and explained that the deed packet would be ready after the final estate filing. Elijah would receive the existing keys and immediate permission to inspect and secure the property. He would also take responsibility for its condition once the transfer was recorded. Morgan gathered her papers. Grandma's house needs to be cleared by Sunday, she said. If you left anything there, come before then. I didn't leave anything. There are some work clothes in the mudroom. They were Grandma's. They won't fit me. Elijah looked at her until she understood what she'd said. Morgan put the papers into her folder. Take them if you want them. Hunter stood and buttoned his jacket. When you see the cleanup estimate, call me before you panic. I might be able to fold the parcel into the land sale. I'm not selling it. You've owned it for about 40 seconds. I'm not selling it. Hunter smiled, though there was no humor in it. Everybody sells when the number gets practical. Elijah took his copy of the form from Mr. Bell. Then you won't have to waste time making me an offer. Outside, the July heat had settled between the brick buildings. Morgan walked toward Julia's sedan, which now belonged to her, along with the house contents. Hunter stopped beside Elijah's truck. The truck had a rusted rear bumper, and a passenger window held closed with a folded piece of cardboard. Hunter looked it over without hiding the calculation. You know, Morgan thinks this is about proving something. She thinks everything is about finishing paperwork. That's how she deals with things. Elijah put the signed form behind the truck seat. Hunter lowered his voice. The greenhouse is in the wrong place for what I'm trying to put together. It's been there longer than your deal. I know. I'm telling you so you don't get surprised later. Surprised by what? Costs, access questions, boundary issues. A buyer who doesn't want a collapsed structure near a project. That sounds like the buyer's problem. Hunter studied him for a moment. You've gotten sharper. No. You just didn't ask me many questions before. Elijah opened the truck door. Hunter stepped back. I'm trying to keep this simple, Hunter said. For who? Hunter had no quick answer. Elijah got in and left him standing beside the curb. Cedar Ridge Road ran east of Guthrie through open fields and low-wooded patches. The pavement narrowed after the last cluster of houses. Elijah drove with the windows down because the truck's air conditioner only worked when it felt charitable. He passed Dawn Peterson's nursery near the junction. Rows of shade cloth stretched behind a wooden sign, and sprinklers flashed above the outdoor stock. Dawn's pickup wasn't out front. Elijah kept going. The greenhouse entrance appeared half a mile later. 2 stone posts marked a gravel lane almost hidden by Johnson grass. The chain between them had sagged into the weeds. Elijah parked beside the road and found Julia's keys in the envelope Mr. Bell had given him. There were 4 of them. One opened the chain. That shouldn't have felt like a victory, but it did. He drove down the lane slowly, grass scraped beneath the truck. The greenhouse came into view beyond the cottonwoods, and the photographs had been honest. The center roof section was down. Several metal ribs had folded inward, taking old plastic panels with them. Broken growing benches leaned under the weight. A mulberry sapling had rooted near the north wall. The surviving frame looked thin against the afternoon sky. The workroom stood at the southern end, square and plain, its cinder blocks stained green near the foundation. Part of the gutter had pulled loose. Rainwater had cut a narrow trench beside the door. Elijah shut off the engine. For a while, he didn't get out. At the attorney's office, the greenhouse had been paper. Out here, it had weight. Every bent rib would need lifting. Every broken panel would need removing. The weeds hid nails, snakes, holes, and probably all three. He thought of the $6,000. Then he noticed the old thermometer beside the workroom door. Julia had painted its wooden frame yellow because she said useful things shouldn't have to be ugly. The paint was peeling, but the glass tube was whole. Elijah got out. The workroom key stuck halfway. He leaned his shoulder against the swollen door, worked the key back, and tried again. The door opened with a scrape. Hot, stale air came out first. Then the familiar smell of dry soil, fertilizer, old wood, and peppermint. The cot was folded against one wall. A metal desk stood beneath the window. Julia's dented tea tin remained above the sink. Someone had removed the electric kettle, but left one chipped green mug. Elijah crossed to the breaker panel and lifted the cover. Most switches were marked in Julia's handwriting: workroom, fans, heat mats, well pump, irrigation control. The well pump switch had a strip of red tape across it. Beneath the sink, a faded pipe entered through the block wall and ran toward the greenhouse. A round valve handle sat above it, flaked with rust. Elijah touched the handle but didn't turn it. The well had been disconnected years ago. He remembered Julia complaining about the cost. A scratching noise came from the corner. Elijah stepped back as a field mouse disappeared through a gap near the floor. "All right," he said to the empty room. "You were here first." He opened the window. It moved 3 inches and stopped, exactly as it always had. Outside, clouds were gathering to the west. The loose gutter knocked against the wall when the wind rose. If rain came hard, water would run straight under the workroom door. Elijah found a shovel behind the desk. Its handle was smooth from years of use. He cleared leaves from the drainage trench, then widened it until the ground sloped away from the wall. Near the corner, the shovel struck a buried strip of concrete. He followed it for several feet and found the old channel Julia had built to carry runoff toward the beds. Mud and roots had filled it. The channel itself was sound. He worked until sweat darkened his shirt. When the first rain reached the cottonwoods, water ran off the broken roof, struck the ground, and moved through the channel instead of entering the workroom. Elijah stood beneath the shallow overhang and watched it flow. The greenhouse was still collapsed. The roof was unsafe, the lane was overgrown, and he had no clear idea what Julia expected him to do with any of it. But the workroom floor stayed dry. He went inside, unfolded the cot, and set Julia's green mug upright beside the sink. Then he carried his duffel from the truck and placed it beneath the desk. The rain lasted 40 minutes. Water ticked inside the broken greenhouse and ran through the channel he'd cleared. The workroom smelled less stale with the window open. Elijah swept mouse droppings from the corners, shook out the cot, and checked the ceiling for damp spots. There was one above the desk. He moved the desk 6 inches. That was how Elijah had always handled a place that wasn't his. He learned where it leaked, which doors needed lifting, and how much noise was acceptable after dark. He didn't ask for repairs if he could move around the problem. Asking made people consider whether keeping him was worth the trouble. Julia had noticed that habit before he knew she was watching. A year after they met, she found him replacing a cracked pane in the greenhouse. He'd cut his thumb and wrapped it in electrical tape. "Why didn't you tell me you needed gloves?" she asked. "I didn't." "You're bleeding on my glazing putty. It'll wipe off." Julia took the putty knife from his hand. "You do understand that being useful and being cared about aren't the same thing." He'd looked at her then, waiting for the rest. Adults often said kind things before assigning a condition. Julia only pointed toward the workroom. First aid kit, top drawer. And use the good bandages, not those miserable little ones. Now, Elijah found the first aid kit in the same drawer. The good bandages were gone. 2 small ones remained, curled at the edges from summer heat. He closed the drawer and sat on the cot. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Morgan. He called her back. "Where are you?" she asked. "At the greenhouse." "You're there now?" "Yes." There was a pause. Morgan hadn't expected him to go straight there. "Did you get into the workroom?" "The key worked." "Is it safe?" "The workroom is—" "I meant the property." "I know." She let out a breath. "I need help at Grandma's house tomorrow. The donation truck is coming in the afternoon, and Hunter says his back is bothering him. Hunter's back bothered him whenever furniture appeared." "What time?" Elijah asked. 8 would help. "All right. And bring work gloves. I have gloves. I'm just saying." Elijah looked at the cracked pane above the sink. "I'll be there." Morgan softened after she got what she needed. She always did. "You can take the clothes from the mudroom. There may be some greenhouse things in the garage, too." "Okay, thank you." He ended the call and looked around the workroom. He'd agreed before asking what Morgan planned to keep, what she planned to donate, or whether Julia had left anything specifically for him besides the parcel. Part of him had been relieved just to be asked. That realization sat badly. He charged his phone from a working outlet, then checked each breaker without touching the taped well switch. The lights came on in the workroom. 2 fluorescent tubes buzzed above him. One flickered twice and held. The light changed the room. It also showed every cobweb, stain, and dead beetle. Elijah found a bucket and cleaned until after dark. He ate crackers and a can of tuna from the truck. When he lay on the cot, the folded blanket beneath his head smelled faintly of cedar chips. At 7 the next morning, someone knocked on the workroom door. Elijah sat up too fast and struck his shoulder against the wall. "Elijah?" a woman called. "Your truck's outside, so don't pretend you aren't here." He opened the door. Dawn Peterson stood beneath the loose gutter with 2 coffees and a paper sack. Her gray-streaked hair was tied back under a faded nursery cap. Mud covered the toes of her boots. She looked past Elijah into the workroom, taking in the cot and the open duffel. "You slept here? It's dry. That wasn't my question." "You didn't ask a question." Dawn handed him a coffee. "Julia said you answered sideways when you didn't want help." "What else did she say?" "That you over-tighten hose clamps." Elijah took the coffee. "She said you drowned seedlings." She was talking about one tray of salvia from 19 years ago. It must have made an impression. Dawn smiled despite herself and gave him the paper sack. Inside was a biscuit with egg and sausage. "Why are you here?" he asked. "I saw lights last night." "From the nursery, from the road." "I came early because I didn't want to meet whoever was stripping copper." "You brought the copper thief breakfast?" "I brought myself breakfast. You looked hungry." Elijah stepped aside. Dawn entered and ran one finger across the desk. The dust was gone. "You started cleaning. I cleared the drain too." "I saw. That trench hasn't moved water properly in years." "Why didn't anybody clear it?" "Not my property." The answer was plain, without apology. Dawn had helped Julia in the greenhouse and bought plants from her, but she hadn't confused affection with ownership. She stood at the sink and tested the tap. Nothing came out. "Still disconnected?" she asked. "As far as I know. Julia carried water in here toward the end. Stubborn woman." Elijah looked through the window at the collapsed frame. "Can any of it be saved?" Dawn didn't answer immediately. She went outside, and he followed with his coffee. She walked the perimeter slowly. At the northwest corner, she pressed the toe of her boot against a bent frame base. She checked 2 upright ribs, then crouched beside the foundation. Elijah waited. Dawn didn't reassure people before she had facts. "The center is finished," she said. "You'll need to remove it," I figured. "The south bay might stand if you brace it before the next hard wind." "How long?" "Depends on the wind." "That's helpful." "You want comfort or an answer?" "An answer, soon." She pointed toward 3 steel posts under the surviving roof section. Julia doubled those after the ice storm. "The footings look solid. If you clear the load from the bent ribs and brace the end, you might save enough covered space to work." Elijah followed her finger. Until then, he'd seen one collapsed greenhouse. Dawn had just separated it into what was lost and what remained. "What would you do first?" he asked. "Get everything off the standing frame? Then call someone who knows structural work. I know enough. That's what people say before metal lands on them. I worked commercial maintenance for 3 years. Dawn looked at him more carefully. "Julia told me you fixed equipment. She didn't tell you I installed it?" "No, she left things out when she thought people should ask." Dawn walked into the south bay. Broken plastic pots cracked under her boots. She lifted a length of shade cloth and found the top of an old propagation bench beneath it. "This one's sound," she said. "Oak slats. Todd built these." "Todd Armstrong? You know him?" "I met him twice. He ran this place before his knees told him to stop. He'll complain if you call before 10, but he'll answer." She pulled out her phone and read Elijah the number. He saved it without calling. Dawn checked her watch. "I have a delivery coming. Thanks for the coffee. I need the cup back." He looked at the paper cup. "I'm joking, Elijah. I knew that." "No, you didn't." She started toward her pickup, then stopped. "I have used lumber behind my loading shed. Some is too short for my benches. You can have it if you haul away the whole pile." "What's wrong with it?" "Nails, mud. One board smells like something died on it." "What do you want for it?" "I just told you. Haul all of it, not only the good pieces." He understood that kind of offer. It wasn't charity. Dawn had a problem, and he could solve it. "I'll come this afternoon. You'll need a trailer. I can make 2 trips. You'll make 6 in that truck, then I'll make 6. Dawn nodded once. "After 3. Don't block the customer entrance." At Julia's house, Morgan had already labeled the rooms with strips of painter's tape. Keep, donate, Hunter, Morgan. The labels appeared on doors, chairs, lamps, and cardboard boxes. Elijah stood in the entryway holding his gloves. The house looked wrong without Julia's shoes beside the mat. Morgan had removed the photographs from the hall. Pale rectangles remained where the frames had kept sunlight off the wallpaper. "You're late," Morgan called from the kitchen. "It's 8. It's 8:03. He found her wrapping plates and newspaper. Hunter was at the table drinking coffee with both hands. He wore clean sneakers and no work gloves. "Back still bad?" Elijah asked. Hunter gave him a patient look. "It comes and goes, mostly when there's lifting, mostly when there's Elijah." Morgan pushed a roll of trash bags toward them. "Can we not do this?" Elijah carried boxes from the pantry, while Hunter sorted papers at the table. Morgan moved quickly, deciding the fate of objects before anyone else finished looking at them. The blue mixing bowls went to Morgan. Julia's silverware went to donation because neither of them liked the pattern. Hunter took the cast iron skillet after Morgan said it might be valuable. A grocery bag full of plastic containers went into the trash. Elijah watched Julia's kitchen disappear in practical pieces. At 10, Morgan sent him to the garage for empty boxes. He found a row of garden tools against the wall. Most were marked donate. Julia's pruning shears were missing. So was the narrow transplanting spade she kept in her back pocket. Behind the lawnmower sat a lidded storage tote. The painter's tape across it didn't say keep or donate. It said Elijah Greenhouse. He crouched beside it. Inside were Julia's work apron, 3 pairs of gloves, packets of plant labels, a box of spare fan belts, and the old brass key she used for the greenhouse cabinets. Beneath them lay a green metal cash box. Elijah lifted it carefully. It wasn't locked. Inside he found receipts, equipment manuals, and a stack of index cards bound with a rubber band. Julia had written notes on every card. South vent sticks in wet weather. Bench 3 needs left a leg shimmed. Don't trust Hunter with a shovel. He gets bored. Elijah read that one twice. Morgan appeared in the doorway. "I forgot about that tote. Did Grandma pack it?" "I assume so." "When?" "I don't know. Before she went into the hospital, maybe." "You put the label on it?" Morgan glanced at the tape. "She asked me to." Elijah looked at her. "She told you this went with the greenhouse?" "She said not to mix it with the house things." "And you didn't mention it yesterday." "There was a lot going on." "You mentioned the old clothes." "I remembered the clothes." He set the cash box back inside. Morgan crossed her arms, already feeling accused. "I kept it separate, didn't I?" "Yes." "So, what exactly are you upset about?" Elijah almost said nothing. That was his usual answer. It kept him helpful. It kept Morgan from calling him ungrateful. It let everyone leave the conversation believing he hadn't needed more. He stood. "I'm upset that Grandma had to label a box so I'd get anything she meant for me." Morgan's face tightened. "That isn't fair. Did you know the box was here?" "Yes, then it's fair enough." She looked toward the kitchen, where Hunter was opening and closing cabinet doors. "We didn't know what you were going to choose. The label says greenhouse. You could have taken the cash. Then what would you have done with this?" "I don't know, Elijah." That answer was honest, and it hurt more than a prepared one. Morgan lowered her voice. I'm not trying to erase you. You're trying to finish. I have handled everything since Grandma died. The funeral, the hospital bill, the house, all of it. I know. No, I don't think you do. You get to show up, make one emotional decision, and walk away with a piece of property. I'm left sorting 40 years of her things. Elijah looked at the labels filling the garage. Morgan was tired. She was also used to calling her decisions burdens and everyone else's needs complications. Both things could be true. You could have asked me to help before today, he said. You don't answer half the time. You call when you need something lifted. Morgan opened her mouth, then closed it. He carried the tote to his truck before she could turn the silence into another task. Hunter followed him outside with Julia's skillet tucked under one arm. You leaving? I have work to do at the greenhouse. Morgan planned on you taking the dresser apart. She can ask you. My back. Comes and goes. Hunter leaned against the truck bed. What's in the tote? Greenhouse supplies? Anything useful? To me, I mean valuable. Elijah slid it behind the cab. Not to you. He returned to the garage for Julia's long-handled tools. Morgan stood beside the labeled pile. Take the pruning shears too, she said. I didn't see them. She reached into a box marked Morgan and pulled them out. For a second, neither moved. Then she placed the shears in Elijah's hand. She used them out there. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough to repair what sat between them. But it was the first thing Morgan had taken from her own pile and returned. Elijah put the shears in the tote. I'll come back Sunday for the work clothes, he said. I'm not taking apart the dresser today. Morgan looked toward the kitchen. All right. He drove to Dawn's nursery after 3. The rejected lumber pile was worse than promised. He loaded every board, including the one with the smell, and made the first of 6 trips down Cedar Ridge Road. By sunset, he had enough usable wood to brace the south bay. He carried Julia's apron into the workroom and hung it on the hook beside the sink. Then he set the green cash box on the desk, took out the first equipment manual, and began matching Julia's notes to the greenhouse that was now his. The fan manual showed a wiring diagram for equipment that no longer hung from the frame. Elijah compared the model number to one written on the breaker panel. They matched. Julia had kept records for machines that were gone. He checked the next manual. That one covered the vents. A note in the margin said, Todd replaced the north gears after a hard freeze. Another note listed the size of a belt and where Julia had bought it. Nothing explained why she'd packed the papers for Elijah, but they gave him a way to tell what had once connected to what. He worked until the light above the desk began to bother his eyes. Then he made a list for the next morning. Before touching the standing bay, he needed to remove the fallen weight beside it. He needed to know which frame members could be cut safely. He also needed someone who remembered how Julia's greenhouse had been assembled. He called Todd at 10 minutes after 10. A man answered on the 6th ring. Who is this? Elijah Meyer. There was a pause. Julia's Elijah? Elijah looked at the cash box. Yes. I heard about her. I'm sorry. Thank you. Another pause followed. Todd wasn't a man who filled quiet space for comfort. Elijah told him about the collapse, the surviving South Bay, and Dawn's opinion of the footings. He explained that he had lumber for bracing, but wanted someone to look at the frame before he started cutting. Dawn told you to call me, Todd said. She gave me your number. She wants something. She wants the greenhouse standing. That's something. Elijah heard a metal rattle on Todd's end, followed by a muttered complaint. You working? Elijah asked. I'm trying to get my tiller started. It's winning. What kind? Old rear tine Troy built. I can look at it. You calling for advice or making a trade? A trade. Todd made a low sound that might have been approval. I'll come by at noon. You get my tiller running, I'll give you the afternoon. Elijah agreed. Before Todd arrived, he began clearing the safest section. He wore Julia's gloves and moved one broken pod at a time, checking where each bent rib rested before pulling anything free. The old benches were heavier than they looked. Their wooden tops had rotted, but the metal legs remained bolted to the floor. Elijah removed the bolts where he could. When one stripped, he cut it with a battery grinder. By 11, he'd opened a narrow path from the workroom to the south wall. A coil of brittle hose lay beneath one bench. Under another, he found the main irrigation pipe. It ran close to the foundation, then turned down into the concrete beside a waist-high valve. The round handle was the one he had seen through the workroom wall. From inside, it had looked like part of the disconnected well system. Out here, a second pipe continued north beneath the growing beds. Elijah brushed dirt from the valve body. The metal showed less rust beneath the dust than he expected. Someone had coated the stem with grease. He touched it with one finger. The grease was old, but still soft beneath the surface. Julia hadn't left much machinery in working condition. She had maintained this valve. Elijah fetched a rag and an adjustable wrench. He wasn't trying to start the irrigation. There was no connected well to start. He only wanted to know whether the valve was frozen before he built a brace across that section. He held the pipe steady and applied pressure to the handle. It didn't move. He stopped, added penetrating oil around the stem, and waited. Then he worked the handle backward a fraction before turning it forward. The valve shifted. A low knock sounded beneath the concrete. Elijah let go. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something moved inside the buried pipe. It wasn't the hollow scrape of loose debris. It was a short push, followed by a faint hiss. He placed his palm against the metal. The pipe trembled. Elijah closed the valve to its original position. The tremor stopped. He stood still, listening to rainwater drip from the frame, though the morning was dry. The well switch remained taped off. The sink tap had been empty, yet the pipe had held pressure. He opened the valve a quarter turn. The same knock came from beneath the floor. This time the hiss lasted several seconds. A coupling near the first growing bed darkened around one edge. Water formed there, no more than a thin bead. Elijah closed the valve again. Todd's truck came down the lane 12 minutes later. It was an older white pickup with a rusted utility trailer behind it. A red tiller occupied most of the trailer. Todd got out slowly and stood with one hand on the door. He wore suspenders over a light work shirt. His white hair had been cut with more care on one side than the other. His attention went first to the greenhouse, then to the lumber pile, then to Elijah. "You slept here," he said. "Dawn say that?" "She called to make sure I came. I thought she might." Todd walked toward the standing bay. "She also said you cleared the drain." Elijah waited for him to finish looking. Todd tested the base of each upright with the heel of his boot. He checked the fasteners where the bent center ribs pulled against the south section. "Don't cut that one," he said. "I wasn't going to." "You marked it." "I marked every place carrying weight." Todd looked at the chalk lines. "Good." He pointed toward the lumber. "Those pieces are too narrow for the main brace. I have doubled length set aside. You'll need through bolts. There's a box in the truck." Todd looked almost disappointed that Elijah had thought of it. "Show me the tiller," Elijah said. The fuel in Todd's machine smelled bad. The throttle cable moved, but the carburetor bowl was dry. Elijah removed the fuel line and found a piece of deteriorated rubber blocking the inlet. He replaced the line with a spare from his truck, cleaned the fitting, and checked the oil. Todd watched from a folding chair he'd brought with him. "You carry fuel hose around?" he asked. "I carry things that keep old equipment from becoming scrap." "Julia liked you." Elijah kept his eyes on the clamp. "I liked her. She talked about you. She talked about everybody. Not the same way." Elijah pulled the starter cord. The engine coughed once. Todd leaned forward. On the third pull, the tiller started. It shook against its straps while gray smoke cleared from the exhaust. Elijah adjusted the idle until it settled. Todd stood. "Shut it down before it walks off the trailer." Elijah did. "You got half a day," Todd said. That was the deal. They worked first on the fallen ribs. Todd showed him where the old frame sections joined and which bolts Julia had replaced after the ice storm. Elijah did the climbing and lifting. Todd stayed below, watched each load, and told him when metal shifted where it shouldn't. They cut 2 twisted braces and lowered them with rope. Then they built a temporary support beneath the south ridge. The double lumber fit. When Elijah tightened the final through bolt, the frame stopped moving in the wind. It wasn't repaired, but the standing section no longer depended on the collapsed center to hold its shape. Todd stood beneath it and looked upward. "That'll buy you time," he said. "How much?" "Ask the weather." "You and Dawn practiced that answer?" "No. We both spent our lives around people who want a date from wood and steel." Elijah climbed down. His arms shook from holding the drill overhead. Todd walked toward the workroom. "You have water?" "In the truck." "I meant running water." "No." Todd looked toward the irrigation line. The damp bead at the coupling had grown into a dark streak. "What did you do?" "Turned the valve." "Why?" "I needed to know whether it was frozen." Todd stepped over a broken bench and crouched beside the pipe. He He touched the damp coupling, then wiped his finger on his trousers. "Open it," he said. Elijah opened the valve a quarter turn. The knock sounded under the concrete. The pipe gave its faint tremor. Todd placed 2 fingers against it and frowned. "Close it." Elijah did. Todd walked into the workroom and opened the breaker panel. He saw the red tape across the well switch. "That tape yours?" "No, Julia's." "How do you know?" "She used red for dead equipment, blue for things that needed repair." "Was the well disconnected?" "Yes." "Pump was removed. Power line was capped. That system shouldn't have pressure from the well. Could rain collect in it? Not like that." Todd returned to the valve. He looked at the pipe where it entered the concrete, then at the north beds. "When did you last work here?" Elijah asked. "Work? Years ago. I came out each spring to help Julia flush the lines. After the well was disconnected, every season." "What did she flush them with?" Todd took off his cap and wiped his forehead. "I never saw the source." "You helped her flush a system and didn't see where the water came from?" "She had me checking emitters inside. She opened it before I arrived. Didn't you ask?" "Of course I asked. She told me to watch for blocked heads." "That was her answer?" "That was Julia." Todd put his cap back on. "The last time I came was 2 years ago. She couldn't walk the whole line, so I did it. We had clean water at the south beds, less pressure up north. I told her the valve needed packing. She wrote it down." "In what?" "Maintenance log. Green cover, spiral binding." She kept it in the long cabinet. Elijah used the brass key from the tote. It opened the long cabinet beside the workroom sink. Shelves held empty jars, rolls of plant tape, and 2 boxes of irrigation fittings. There was no green log. Todd checked behind the jars. She wouldn't throw it away. Morgan cleared some things. This would have stayed here, unless Julia moved it. Todd examined the cabinet door. Faded marker labels showed where tools had once hung. Near the bottom, one outline was cleaner than the rest, as if a rectangular object had rested there until recently. Elijah closed the cabinet. A vehicle sounded on the gravel lane. A county pickup stopped beside Todd's truck. A woman in a tan shirt stepped out carrying a clipboard. She identified herself as a county building inspector and asked for the property owner. "That's me," Elijah said. "Transfer finalized?" "Being recorded." She looked at the greenhouse. "We received an estate condition notice after the storm report. I need to inspect from outside the collapse zone." Morgan hadn't mentioned any notice. Mr. Bell hadn't either. Elijah walked with her around the perimeter. She photographed the fallen center, measured the distance to the workroom, and checked the newly braced south bay without entering it. "Who installed the temporary support?" she asked. "I did, with an experienced greenhouse foreman advising." Todd raised one hand from several feet away. The inspector studied the through bolts and base supports. "This section is improved. The central collapse is still a hazard. What do I need to do?" "Submit a stabilization plan and remove loose material that can leave the property. The standing portion needs to be made safe or closed off. You have 60 days from transfer." 60 days? That's the county allowance. "And if I can't finish everything?" "You don't have to rebuild in 60 days. You do have to stabilize it." She wrote on a form and handed Elijah the yellow copy. "Keep people outside the taped area. Call before covering any structural work you want, included in the inspection." Then she left. Todd read the form over Elijah's shoulder. "You can do it." "With what money?" "I said you can do it. I didn't say it would be cheap." Elijah looked at the braced south bay. His deliberate first repair had worked. It had also shown the county enough surviving structure to require a proper plan instead of simple cleanup. He folded the notice and put it in his pocket. "Did Julia ever say why she kept flushing those lines?" he asked. "No." "Did Morgan or Hunter come out when you did it?" "Never saw them." "Who else knew?" Todd looked toward the valve. Dawn knew Julia maintained the beds. She didn't know how. Julia didn't tell people a thing until she thought they'd done enough work to need it. Todd gathered his tools and left with the running tiller. Elijah locked the gate behind him, returned to the workroom, and called Morgan. "I need to know where the greenhouse records went," he said when she answered. "What records?" "A green maintenance log, spiral binding. I put some notebooks in the garage." "Don't throw anything else away." Morgan went quiet. "Elijah, we're clearing the house on Sunday. Then I'll be there before you start." He ended the call, set the county notice beside Julia's cash box, and opened the valve just far enough to feel the buried line tremble beneath his hand. On Saturday, he replaced the leaking coupling and cleaned the first 6 irrigation heads in the south bed. He opened the valve in short turns. Each time, the buried pipe knocked once. Water reached the first head as a weak spray, then the second. The third stayed dry until he removed a plug of dirt with a piece of wire. By the 6th head, the pressure had fallen. Elijah shut the valve and waited. After several minutes, the pressure returned. Whatever fed the line wasn't endless, or something was restricting it. That was all he could tell without digging. He spent the rest of the day removing loose plastic from the standing bay. The county notice required material that could blow away to be secured. He rolled the old sheets, tied them with rope, and stacked them beside the workroom. At dusk, he drove into Guthrie for bolts, a pipe cap, and 2 sheets of plywood. He stood in the hardware aisle adding the prices on his phone. His checking account held $3,800. Rent on the room over the garage was due the following week. His truck needed front tires. The estate transfer would bring recording costs, utility deposits, and whatever the county wanted for the inspection. He put 1 sheet of plywood back. Sunday morning, he reached Julia's house at 7:30. Morgan's car was already in the driveway. The donation truck wasn't due until noon, but boxes lined the front porch. Morgan opened the door before he knocked. "You said before we started." "I am before you started. We started yesterday." "You said Sunday." "I had time." Elijah stepped inside. The living room was nearly empty. Julia's sofa remained against one wall, along with the dresser Morgan had wanted him to take apart. Everything else had been removed or boxed. "Where are the notebooks?" he asked. "In the garage." Hunter came from the hallway carrying a framed picture. "Morning." The photograph showed Julia standing beside him at a real estate awards dinner. Hunter wore a dark suit. Julia looked uncomfortable in a silver blouse. He turned the frame face down under his arm when he noticed Elijah looking. Morgan led Elijah to the garage. "I put the garden papers over there." 3 boxes sat beneath a folding table. One was marked house receipts. One said garden. The third said recycle. Elijah opened the garden box. It held seed catalogs, articles clipped from newspapers, and a notebook full of recipes for soil mixes. The green maintenance log wasn't there. He checked the house receipts. Morgan watched him go through folders for insurance, appliance warranties, and repairs. "What exactly is in this log?" she asked. "I don't know. That's why I'm looking for it." "Then how do you know it matters?" Todd said. "Grandma used it." Morgan glanced toward the driveway. "Todd's been out there?" "He helped me brace the South Bay." "You hired him?" "We traded work." "For what?" "Why does that matter?" "I'm trying to understand what you're doing." "I'm trying to stabilize the greenhouse." "You could hire a demolition crew and be finished." "With what money?" Morgan's expression changed. "That's what I was afraid of." "You were afraid I'd ask you for money?" "I was afraid you'd take on something you couldn't afford." "You didn't say that at the attorney's office." "I told you to take the settlement." "That would have made this easier for you." "It would have made it easier for everyone." Elijah looked at the recycle box. A green corner showed beneath a stack of envelopes. He pulled out the spiral notebook. Dirt had darkened its cover. The first pages were dated from years earlier and filled with ordinary entries. Fan belt replaced, heater serviced, south vents cleaned. Todd had written some notes in block letters. Julia's handwriting filled the rest. Elijah turned toward the final pages. Morgan reached for the notebook. "Let me see." He moved it out of her reach. "It came from Grandma's house," she said. "It belongs with the greenhouse records. You don't know that. It was kept in the greenhouse cabinet. Then why was it here? Maybe she was writing in it." Morgan held out her hand. "I'm the estate representative. I have to know what leaves." Elijah placed the notebook on the folding table, but kept his hand over it. "You labeled a box for recycling without checking what was inside. I checked it. Then you saw this." "I saw an old garden notebook. You heard me ask about a green maintenance log on Friday." I didn't connect the two. Elijah believed her. Morgan hadn't hidden the log because she knew what it contained. She had nearly thrown it away because it belonged to a place she'd already decided had no value. That didn't make him feel better. "I'm taking the greenhouse records," he said. "Make copies first." "No." "Elijah. You can copy anything related to the house or estate bills. The greenhouse manuals, logs, and supplies go with me. Nothing from that property gets donated, recycled, or offered to Hunter without asking me." Morgan stared at him. He had never spoken to her that way. He had rarely spoken to anyone that way. "Hunter isn't taking greenhouse property. He took Grandma's pruning shears. You have those now, because you gave them back. She looked toward the door. You're acting like we stole from you. I'm telling you what happens next. Morgan folded her arms. And if I say no, then Mr. Bell can sort every piece before it leaves. That would delay the estate. Morgan knew it, and Elijah knew she knew it. Her arms dropped. Take the records. If I find anything else, I'll put it aside. Call me when you find it. I said I would put it aside, and I'm asking you to call. Morgan looked tired again. For once, Elijah didn't rush to make the request smaller. All right, she said, I'll call. He carried the green log to his truck. Hunter was outside by then, arranging picture frames in the back of his vehicle. Find what you wanted? A maintenance log. For the greenhouse? Yes. Why did Grandma bring it here? I don't know. Hunter closed the hatch. You've got Todd working, and Dawn's truck has been over there twice. People notice things. Dawn brought lumber. Is she buying the property? No. Going into business with you? Elijah put the log behind his seat. I'm fixing the roof. That wasn't my question. It's the answer you're getting. Hunter rested one hand on the truck door. The developer's asking whether your parcel can be included. I told him it probably could. You told him wrong. I said probably. Tell him no. Hunter's jaw shifted. Don't make decisions just because you enjoy telling me no. I made the decision before you asked. Elijah got into his truck and left. He read the log at the greenhouse desk. Julia's entries followed the seasons. Heater checks in autumn, fan service in spring, shade cloth repairs before summer. After the well was disconnected, the irrigation entries continued. Flush south beds, check north restriction, service valve. The final irrigation entry was dated 2 years earlier. Full flush complete. Pressure steady at south. North still slow. CR edge marker reset after mower. Todd checked heads. East service clear. Elijah read it 3 times. CR could mean Cedar Ridge. The greenhouse sat west of the road. The words East Service suggested something beyond the property, but Julia hadn't drawn a map. He called Todd. What does the road edge marker look like? Elijah asked after reading the entry. Todd didn't answer right away. Short iron post, maybe. Julia used to paint utility markers yellow. Did you ever see one? I remember something near the ditch. I thought it marked the property line. Can you come out? I'm eating lunch. After lunch. That wasn't an agreement. I'll tune the tiller drive belt. Todd arrived an hour later with the tiller still on his trailer. They walked from the greenhouse toward Cedar Ridge Road. The old irrigation pipe disappeared into the ground near the south wall. Its direction was roughly east, but weeds and gravel covered everything beyond the foundation. At the road, they searched the west ditch first. Todd found the marker beneath a mat of dead grass. Only an inch showed above the soil. Elijah cleared around it with Julia's transplanting spade. The marker was a narrow iron post painted yellow. On its top, someone had stamped a small letter G. That hers? Elijah asked. Todd crouched beside it. Looks like her punch set. What does G stand for? Greenhouse, maybe. Elijah followed the line between the workroom pipe and the marker. It pointed directly toward Cedar Ridge Road. He crossed the pavement and searched the east ditch. There was no matching post, only a locked metal service box set farther back near a cooperative water line. Its label had faded beyond reading. Todd stayed on the west shoulder. Don't touch that box, he called. I'm not touching it. A truck came around the bend, and Elijah stepped deeper into the ditch until it passed. He looked back across the road. From that angle, the service box, yellow marker, and greenhouse wall nearly lined up. Nearly wasn't proof. They returned to the property. Todd adjusted the tiller belt, while Elijah cleared the rest of the south bed. When they finished, Elijah opened the irrigation valve. The first 6 heads sprayed. A 7th sputtered, then began to turn. Todd watched the water darken the dry soil. That's more pressure than Julia had at the end. For 7 heads, it's 7 more than you had Friday. Dawn arrived before they shut it down. She carried a pressure gauge, a bucket, and a clipboard. Todd called, she said. Todd didn't look sorry. Dawn attached the gauge at the end of the restored section. Elijah opened the valve again. The pressure rose, held briefly, then dropped as more heads began spraying. She timed how long it took to fill the bucket. Then she repeated the test with only 3 heads open. What are you trying to grow? Elijah asked. I'm not trying to grow anything here. You are. I haven't decided. You need to. Dawn removed the gauge. My perennial supplier is retiring after next spring. I need someone close enough to deliver on short notice and small enough to adjust varieties. You want me to replace a commercial grower? I want to know if you can. Elijah looked at the open frame, temporary braces, and one wet bed. I don't have a roof. You have part of one. You know equipment, and Julia taught you enough not to kill everything. She taught you more. I have a nursery to run. I don't need another greenhouse. Dawn took a folded paper from her clipboard. It was a draft supply agreement. The total over 5 growing seasons was $240,000, divided into seasonal orders with quality and delivery requirements. Elijah read the total again. This is conditional, Dawn said. You prove dependable legal water access. You stabilize enough covered space. You meet 2 trial deliveries before the first full season. You wrote this before today. I wrote it after I saw the bracing. You didn't know the water worked. I knew I needed a supplier. The water decides whether that supplier can be you. Todd read over Elijah's shoulder. That'll buy more than plywood. It'll also require more than plywood, Dawn said. I'm not rescuing him. If he misses delivery, I buy elsewhere. Elijah folded the draft along its original crease. I need records for whatever is across the road, he said. You need to know whether you have a right to use it, Dawn replied. Water coming through a pipe doesn't mean it belongs to you. That was the larger problem. The line worked. The beds could grow plants again. For the first time, the greenhouse had a practical future someone else was willing to pay for. But the offer made the unknown pipe more than a curiosity. Elijah placed Dawn's unsigned agreement beside the county notice. Then he took out his phone, photographed Julia's final log entry, and sent it to the county records office with a request for every old utility and property map tied to the greenhouse parcel. Before he could put the phone down, Hunter sent him a message. I saw water running when I drove past. Don't commit that property to anything until we talk. Elijah didn't answer. He put the phone face down and helped Dawn drain the test line. Todd left with his tiller, promising to return if Elijah found anything in the county records. Dawn stayed long enough to measure the south bay and mark a square on the floor for a trial growing area. You don't need the whole greenhouse to prove you can supply me, she said. You need one section that works every day. How large? 4 benches to start. I only have 1 bench. You have 1 bench standing. There are 2 more under that mess, and I have another frame behind my shed. What's wrong with that one? Nothing. I replaced it with rolling tables. Elijah waited for her terms. Dawn noticed. You can use it for the trial. If we sign, it stays. If we don't, I take it back. That's fair. I wasn't asking. She pointed to the surviving roof. Get a temporary cover over this section. Then we'll test temperature and water use for a week. After she left, Elijah read Hunter's message again. Don't commit that property to anything until we talk. Elijah typed, There's nothing to discuss. He deleted it. Then he typed, I'm not including the greenhouse in your sale. He sent that one. Hunter called immediately. Elijah let it ring while he moved tools into the workroom. The second call came before he finished. On the third, he answered. What's running those beds? Hunter asked. I don't know yet. You're using water you can't identify? I tested a valve. From where? The irrigation line. Hunter waited, expecting more. Where does the line come from? I'm finding out. Does it cross the road? Elijah looked through the open frame toward the yellow marker. Why? Because anything coming from the east crosses land or right-of-way before it reaches you. I know how roads work. I'm serious. If that pipe crosses a parcel involved in the development sale, you don't get to keep using it because Grandma buried it. How do you know she buried it? You just said it was her irrigation line. I didn't say where she put it. Hunter went quiet. Elijah understood then that Hunter hadn't known about the marker. He had seen water from the road, guessed at the problem, and called before Elijah learned enough to answer him. Hunter changed his tone. I'm trying to stop you from creating a dispute. Then don't create one. That isn't how property works. Neither is telling someone what to do with land they own. The deed hasn't recorded yet. The estate transfer is filed. That's not the same. It's enough for you to stay off the property. Hunter laughed once, but this time it sounded tired. I haven't been on it. Keep it that way. Elijah ended the call. The next morning, he removed the rotten slats from Todd's old bench. The metal base was sound. He cut new slats from Dawn's lumber, sanded the rough edges, and treated them with a preservative Julia had left in the cabinet. By noon, the bench stood level. He opened the valve and ran the first 6 heads, pressure held longer than it had the day before. The seventh head slowed after 12 minutes. Elijah shut the water off, checked the coupling, and found the soil beneath it dry. One repair joint had already improved the system. He wrote the runtime on an index card and placed it in the green log. A car entered the lane while he was measuring the bench top. Morgan parked beside the workroom. Hunter's vehicle stopped behind her. Elijah set down the tape measure. Morgan got out wearing flat shoes that sank into the soft ground. She looked at the cleared south bay and the temporary brace. "This is more standing than the photographs showed," she said. I removed the collapsed material around it. Hunter walked toward the irrigation heads. "Is the line on?" "No." He bent to inspect one without touching it. "Looks recent? The head is old. I cleaned it." Morgan held a manila envelope against her side. "Can we talk inside?" "No." She glanced toward the workroom. The cot was visible through the open door. "You're living here?" "I'm staying here while I work." "Elijah, this isn't a home. It's dry. That doesn't make it safe." The county inspected it. Hunter turned from the bed. "The county's been here?" Elijah showed them the yellow notice without handing it over. Morgan read the first lines. 60 days. "I know. This is exactly what we warned you about. You showed me pictures. You didn't tell me the estate had received a condition notice. I didn't know it had. The inspector said it came after the storm report." Morgan looked at Hunter. Hunter shook his head. "Don't look at me. I didn't handle Grandma's mail." Morgan pressed her lips together. "Mr. Bell may have received it after the meeting. Then I'll ask him." She held out the envelope. "Before you spend more money, I want to offer you a way out." Elijah didn't take it. "How much?" $10,000. Hunter looked at her. That amount surprised him. Morgan continued before he could speak. "I'll pay the transfer expenses. You sign the parcel back to the estate, and we'll deal with the county. What will you do with it? Clear it, and then sell it if we can. To Hunter's developer? If that makes sense." Hunter walked closer. "It could be included with the surrounding package. You'd get more than the original settlement and avoid the liability." Elijah looked at the envelope. Morgan had called $6,000 the sensible choice 4 days earlier. Now she was offering 10. "Why more?" he asked. "Because you've put work into it." "No." "Why do you want it now?" Morgan's eyes went to the wet soil beneath the irrigation heads. "We don't know what you're doing," she said. "I'm repairing the greenhouse." "With Dawn?" She tested the bed. "For what?" Elijah picked up the tape measure. "That's between Dawn and me." Morgan drew back slightly. He had never had business that excluded her. Until that week, none of them had thought he possessed anything worth asking about. Hunter stepped between the bed and the workroom. "Dawn doesn't bring a pressure gauge to be friendly." "I didn't say she did." "She's planning to use this. She's considering buying plants if I can produce them." Morgan looked at the standing bench again. "You don't grow plants. I worked here with Grandma. That isn't the same as running a business. No, it isn't." His agreement seemed to unsettle her more than an argument would have. Hunter pointed toward the road. "And if the water crosses property you don't own, then I'll find out what rights exist before you sign anything." "I know." Hunter's voice sharpened. "I'm not asking." Elijah set the tape measure on the bench. "You are on my property telling me I'm not allowed to make an agreement with my neighbor. The transfer isn't final. Then you can wait at the gate until it is." Morgan stepped forward. "That's enough." "No," Elijah said. "You came here together. You brought an offer I didn't ask for." Hunter started giving orders. "I'm answering." Morgan held the envelope tighter. "We're trying to keep you from losing money. I rejected your settlement. I know that costs money. You don't understand how quickly costs build. I understand better than you think." He had spent years knowing the exact balance in his account. Morgan had never had to decide whether a tire could last until payday. She knew larger numbers. Elijah knew what $5 changed. He pointed toward her car. "I'm not selling. I'm working and I have an appointment at county records." Hunter looked toward the road again. "For the pipe? For my property? If you find a route across the east side, call me before you do anything." "No?" "Elijah?" "No. If I find a route, I'll follow the record. I'm not asking your permission." Morgan put the envelope on the workroom desk. "In case you change your mind," she said. Elijah picked it up and returned it to her. "I won't." She took it, but didn't put it away. "Grandma would have wanted us to handle this together." Elijah's hand tightened around the tape measure. Morgan knew that sentence would reach him. For years, he had accepted every late invitation and every extra chore, because being included at all felt like proof that Julia's claim on him had reached the rest of the family. He looked at the two of them. When Grandma wanted my help, she called me, he said. When she wanted me to have something, she labeled it. Don't use her to make your offer sound like a family decision. Morgan's face went still. Hunter opened his car door. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Elijah returned to the bench. Close the gate when you leave. They left without closing it. He walked to the road and pulled the chain back into place himself. At the county records office, a clerk brought him the current parcel map and the transfer filing. The greenhouse parcel appeared as a narrow rectangle west of Cedar Ridge Road. The map showed no utility route. The current map only shows boundaries, she explained. Older service entries may be in the archive books. Elijah showed her the photograph of Julia's log entry and pointed to the words, East Service. She searched the parcel number, then Julia's name. Nothing appeared under the current number. She tried the previous description from before Julia separated the greenhouse ground from a larger tract. A reference appeared. Here, she said. There was a plat filed in 1998. What kind of plat? The index calls it an irrigation service plat. Elijah leaned closer to the screen. The entry listed a book and page, but the scanned image was blank except for a dark border. Can you open it? That is open. Where's the original? County Survey Archive. Older oversized pages were stored separately when the system changed. Can I see it? Submit this request. They retrieve on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was Monday. Elijah filled out the form at the counter. The clerk stamped it and gave him a receipt with a Thursday appointment. Does the entry say where the service runs? He asked. Not in the index. Does it say who provides it? No. But Julia filed something. In 1998? Yes. He photographed the screen. The filing didn't prove the pipes wrote or give him water rights. It did confirm that the valve wasn't an accidental connection someone had forgotten. Julia had put the irrigation service into county records. When he returned to the greenhouse, Dawn's borrowed bench waited beside the gate. She had left a note taped to it. 4 benches. 1 week of dependable tests. Then we talk crops. Elijah unloaded the frame and carried it into the South Bay. As he set the legs on the concrete, Hunter's vehicle slowed on Cedar Ridge Road. It didn't turn in. Hunter looked through the open greenhouse, saw the second bench, and kept driving. Elijah kept working. He leveled Dawn's bench beside the one he'd repaired. The borrowed frame had adjustable feet, which made it easier on the cracked concrete. He set 2 empty trays on top and ran the irrigation for another test. The pressure lasted 14 minutes before the far head slowed. He wrote the result in the log. By Wednesday, he had 4 tests. None lasted long enough for a growing schedule. The line recovered when closed, but he couldn't tell whether the delay came from a restricted pipe, a storage tank, or a service valve he couldn't see. Dawn checked his notes that afternoon. You're timing from the first head, she said. That's when water starts moving. You need to time from the last head. Plants on the far end don't care what happens near the valve. Elijah took the notebook back. Then the useful run is 9 minutes, less once you add beds. I know. Dawn looked at the 2 benches. You're trying to prove too much with too little information? I need 4 benches ready. You need dependable water. The benches are the easy part. They don't feel easy. They will after you've lost a crop. She walked beneath the temporary brace and checked the bolts. The county inspector had emailed a short list that morning. Elijah needed 2 steel cross braces, stronger anchors at the south end, and a barrier around the central collapse. The lumber support could remain during the work, but it wouldn't count as permanent stabilization. Elijah showed Dawn the materials estimate on his phone, $2,600, not including delivery. Did you ask about used steel? She said. They won't certify used pieces for the county. Can you install it? Yes, safely, with Todd. That wasn't what I asked. Yes. Dawn handed back the phone. Then decide what you're protecting. The greenhouse. No. Right now, you have enough money to protect part of it. Which part? Elijah looked at the South Bay. Julia's surviving footings held that section. The workroom shared its wall. If he stabilized those ribs and removed the loose center pieces, he could satisfy the county without rebuilding everything. The South Bay, he said. Good. Stop planning around the section that's already down. He didn't like the sentence. He also knew she was right. The building supplier required half the money before fabrication. Elijah paid the deposit from his phone while Dawn stood beside him. Afterward, his account balance dropped below the amount he needed for another month's rent, truck tires, and the remaining material payment. He could cover 2 of the 3. Dawn read his face. How bad? I'm fine. That answer usually means bad. The workroom has power. It doesn't have a shower. The nursery does. My employee shower isn't part of the lumber deal. I can use the truck stop. Dawn looked toward the cot through the open door. You still have the room over the garage until the end of the month. You gave notice? I'm going to. You don't have to make every choice permanent the day it becomes difficult. I can't pay rent on a room I'm not using. You might need it if the county closes this building. Then I'll deal with that. Dawn pressed her lips together. She wanted to argue, but the greenhouse mattered to her too. If Elijah spent the money elsewhere, the standing bay might be condemned. Her offer had helped push him toward a risk she wouldn't take herself. That workroom needs a smoke detector, she said. It has one. It expired 6 years ago. I'll replace it. And a carbon monoxide detector before you use any heater. I'm not using a heater in July. Before you do. Elijah nodded. Dawn left without offering to pay for either detector. He respected her for that, though part of him had hoped she would. That evening, he drove to the room over the garage. He had lived there for 3 years. It contained a narrow bed, a small refrigerator, a hot plate, and a bathroom with a shower that ran cold whenever the owner used the washing machine below. Elijah's belongings still fit in his truck. He packed his clothes into the duffel. He boxed his equipment manuals and wrapped his only good plate in a towel. The walls looked unchanged when he finished. He had always thought keeping a room ready to leave was a kind of independence. Standing there with the key in his hand, he saw the other side of it. He had never bought a table. He had never hung a picture. He had paid for shelter without asking it to become home. The landlord wasn't in, so Elijah placed the written notice through the mail slot. He kept the key until the end of the month, but he carried everything else to the truck. Rain started while he drove back to Cedar Ridge Road. He covered the boxes with a tarp, moved them into the workroom, and placed the good plate beside Julia's green mug. The Thursday appointment was at 10. A records employee met him at a side counter and led him to a viewing room. She brought a flat archival box wide enough to cover most of the table. Only pencils in here, she said. No drinks. You can photograph it without flash. Elijah put his coffee outside. The file plat was folded inside a protective sleeve. Its paper had yellowed along the edges. Julia's name appeared at the top, beside the date from 1998. The drawing showed the greenhouse parcel before the road had been widened. A heavy line marked Cedar Ridge Road. A thinner line began east of the road at a cooperative service point, crossed the road, and ended inside the greenhouse footprint. Elijah leaned over the table. The route was there. He followed it with his finger above the protective sleeve, careful not to touch. The line passed beneath the road at almost the exact point marked by Julia's yellow post. Beside it, printed in small type, were the words, Irrigation Service Easement, appurtenant to greenhouse parcel. He photographed the full sheet, then took closer pictures of the note and route. What does appurtenant mean here? He asked. The employee stayed on the other side of the table. I can't interpret the legal effect for you. I'm not asking for legal advice. I'm asking what the word means. It generally means attached to the property rather than a person. So, if the property transfers, the recorded document goes with its property record. Whether the service is active or enforceable is a separate question. Elijah read the note again. Julia hadn't maintained someone else's forgotten pipe. She had recorded a service route intended to remain with the greenhouse ground. Is there more with this filing? The employee checked the reference sheet. There's an easement entry and an associated service memorandum. Can I see them? The easement should be in the same book. The service memorandum is held in utility records. She brought a bound volume from another shelf. The recorded easement was only 2 pages. It described a narrow underground route across the roadside strip and allowed installation, maintenance, and irrigation service for the greenhouse parcel. The legal description used old markers and distances. Elijah could follow the road crossing, but not every boundary. The employee returned with a scanned service memorandum. Its heading named the local water cooperative. Julia was listed as the customer who paid for installation. The final paragraph said, service availability was assigned to the greenhouse parcel and transferred with it, subject to cooperative rules and charges. "Can I get certified copies?" Elijah asked. "There's a fee per page." He paid it. The copies proved that Julia had created and recorded the arrangement. They didn't prove the pipe under the current road was the same one on the drawing. They didn't prove it was intact. They didn't show what valve currently supplied the pressure Elijah had felt. Still, the scale of Julia's plan had changed. She had installed the route 28 years before Elijah stood in that viewing room. She had kept flushing it after the well was gone. She had marked the road edge after mowing, disturbed the post. None of that had been accidental maintenance. Elijah called the cooperative from the courthouse steps. A service representative searched the old memorandum number. The account showed no regular household service and no recent billing. The representative could confirm that a dormant irrigation service entry existed, but not whether the physical connection remained active. "We'd need a field location and flow test," she said. "Can the cooperative do that?" "We can open the source valve if the customer proves ownership. We don't locate private pipe beyond our box." "Who does?" "A civil utility engineer or a licensed locator working with one." "What do I need to prove ownership?" "Recorded deed for the greenhouse parcel and the service memorandum. The deed transfer is being recorded. Call when you have it." Elijah ended the call and stood beneath the courthouse awning as rain crossed the street. The greenhouse now had more than unexplained water. It had a recorded route and a service entry tied to its land. But those papers created a harder obligation. If he wanted Dawn's agreement, he had to prove that the old line still followed the recorded path and delivered usable flow. Saving one bay from the county was no longer enough. He drove straight to Dawn's nursery and found her in the loading area checking a delivery of clay pots. She made him wait until the driver left. Then he spread the certified copies on the hood of his truck. Dawn read the plat first. "That line goes under the road," she said, "according to the old drawing, and the service stays with the parcel. According to the memorandum." "Don't start sounding like a lawyer. I'm trying not to say more than I know." "That's new." Elijah ignored that. "The cooperative will open its valve for a test after my deed records. They won't locate the private line. You need an engineer." "Yes." "That costs money." "Yes." Dawn studied him. "You paid the steel deposit." "Yes." "And gave up your room." He hadn't told her that part. She must have seen the truck loaded with boxes. "Yes." Dawn placed one hand on the plat to keep the wind from lifting it. "Why are you doing this now?" "For the contract." "That contract can't pay you until you produce." "I know. You could stabilize the building, sell later, and walk away with something. That was never the plan. You didn't have a plan last week." He looked past her toward rows of nursery plants under shade cloth. Every pot sat where someone had decided it should sit. Water lines ran in straight rows. Deliveries arrived because Dawn had made promises and kept them. "At first I wanted to keep the place because Grandma left it to me," he said. "That isn't enough anymore." "What is?" "I want it working." Dawn waited. "Not to prove Morgan wrong," he added. "Not so Hunter pays more. I want those beds growing. I want the water legal, measured, and reliable. If I can't do that, I'll know before I take your order." Dawn folded the service memorandum along its certified crease and handed it back. Then, "Don't ask me to lower the trial requirements." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking about it?" "I was." She nodded toward the nursery office. "I have a list of engineers who've worked on irrigation systems. Use my phone. Yours barely has a signal here." Elijah called the first name. The engineer was booked for 6 weeks. The second had retired. The third was Isaac Kahn, who could review the records the following week, but wouldn't schedule a route and flow test until Elijah had the recorded deed and cooperative access. Elijah booked the review and agreed to the fee. After the call, he returned to the greenhouse, replaced the expired smoke detector, and moved the last of his boxes against the workroom wall. Then he unfolded the county stabilization plan and crossed out the words temporary shelter at the top. In their place, he wrote operating South Bay. The steel arrived the following morning. Elijah had the driver place it outside the South Bay, clear of the collapsed center. He checked every length against the county plan before signing the delivery receipt. One cross brace was drilled incorrectly. The driver wanted him to accept it and call the supplier later. Elijah refused. "It's one hole," the driver said. "It's one hole in the wrong place. You can drill another. Then it won't match the approved plan." The driver called the supplier, complained into his phone, and loaded the brace again. A replacement arrived that afternoon. Todd watched from his folding chair. Julia would have drilled it, he said. Julia owned the place before the county gave it a deadline. She also hated waiting. I can hate waiting and still send it back. Todd smiled. That's true. They installed the first cross brace before sunset. Todd measured from the ground while Elijah worked from a rented lift. Every bolt received a washer, lock nut, and paint mark. The marks made it easy to see if anything shifted later. The second brace took most of the next day. A base plate had to be cleaned and leveled before the new anchor would sit flat. Elijah wanted to grind it quickly and move on. Todd made him stop. You're building from the bad corner, Todd said. It's off by an eighth, then every piece after it will be off by an eighth. The frame isn't square anymore, the section you're saving can be. Elijah lowered the grinder. They removed the plate, cleaned beneath it, and started again. That cost 2 hours. It saved them from forcing the final brace into place. When both braces were installed, the south bay stood without the temporary lumber support. Elijah loosened the wooden brace slowly. The steel held. Todd struck one upright with the rubber handle of his hammer. The vibration ended before it reached the workroom wall. That's better, he said. Elijah ran his hand across the new steel. You sound surprised. I'm careful with compliments. People start expecting them. Dawn says the same thing about free benches. Dawn expects everything back. Elijah paid Todd for the 2 days. Todd counted the bills once and handed one back. Too much. It's the hourly rate you gave me. I spent half the time sitting down. You spent half the time stopping me from doing it twice. Todd folded the remaining bills into his shirt pocket. Keep the one. You still owe me a drive belt. That wasn't part of the trade. It is now. They built the safety barrier around the central collapse from fence panels and bright tape. Then Elijah removed the last loose sheets the county had marked. The inspector returned Friday morning. She checked the anchor depths, compared the steel to the submitted plan, and looked at Elijah's paint marks. You installed these? She asked, with Todd. Todd stood outside the bay, holding the folder of delivery receipts. The inspector tested the barrier and photographed the cleared roof edges. The south section meets the stabilization requirement. Keep the central area closed until removal or reconstruction. Does that clear the workroom too? The workroom wasn't sited separately. Don't use the greenhouse bay as sleeping space. I don't. She signed the inspection sheet. The county deadline remained on the original notice, but the work required before it had been completed. Elijah no longer had 60 days counting down against a collapsing frame. He had a safe section he could use. He taped the sign sheet inside the workroom window. Dawn saw it when she arrived with 2 rolling carts of plant trays. Don't frame it, she said. The county didn't give you a medal. I wasn't going to. You put it where people can see, so nobody walks in and tells me the bay is unsafe. That sounds like framing it. She rolled the first cart beneath the new braces. The trays held small rosemary and lavender cuttings in square cells. Each row carried a date and variety label. These aren't a full crop trial, she said. This is a handling test. You keep them alive, keep the varieties separate, and deliver them back in saleable condition. How long? 10 days. What are you checking? Temperature control, watering, labeling, disease, and whether you call me before a small problem becomes a dead tray. I don't call late. You don't call at all. Elijah took the clipboard from her. What counts as saleable? Dawn showed him the root and growth standards. She had marked acceptable losses in the agreement. Elijah read every line. You expect some to die, he said. Plants die. Grandma didn't like losing any. Julia hid dead pots behind the compost screen before customers came. Elijah looked at her. You think I'm joking? I'm deciding. Dawn rolled the second card inside. Your first task is to stop treating her like she never made mistakes. She drowned that salvia tray, not me. You've been blaming each other for 19 years? We had a system. They placed the trays on the benches. Elijah adjusted the irrigation heads to keep water off the leaves. The line didn't have enough steady pressure to run every head, so he divided the south bed into 2 manual zones with shut-off valves. That wasn't a permanent solution. It let him water 1 pair of benches at a time. He opened the first zone. Water reached every tray. The gauge Dawn had left rose to a usable level and held for 11 minutes. Elijah closed it before the pressure fell. He waited for the line to recover, then opened the second zone. That one held for 10 minutes. Dawn checked the trays by lifting random cells. Even enough. It won't scale. No, it works for this. Yes. That single word meant more coming from Dawn than any reassurance Morgan had offered. Elijah logged the times, outside temperature, and gauge readings. He also wrote down when each zone needed checking again. Dawn hung a small sensor beneath the roof. This records temperature and humidity. Don't move it because you don't like the numbers. I don't move measuring tools. You move Julia's thermometer. It was hanging crooked. Dawn looked toward the yellow frame beside the workroom door. It now hung straight. Of course it was. The next morning, the rosemary trays were evenly damp. Condensation had formed beneath the temporary roof covering, so Elijah opened the south vent. It stuck halfway. He checked Julia's card. South vent sticks in wet weather. The old gear turned, but the arm dragged at one joint. Elijah cleaned it, replaced a bent pin, and opened the vent fully. The temperature dropped 4 degrees within an hour. He recorded that too. On the 4th day, a white patch appeared on one lavender cell. Elijah removed the affected cell, isolated the tray, and called Dawn. She arrived with a hand lens and inspected it at the workroom desk. Mineral residue, she said. Not mildew? No. What caused it? Water dried on the leaf. I adjusted the heads below the foliage. One nozzle is missing. They found a hairline crack near the nozzle base. Elijah replaced it. The next watering stayed beneath the leaves. Dawn wrote something on the handling sheet. What? Elijah asked. You called. That was one of the requirements. You'd be surprised how many people would rather lose a tray than admit they saw something. I wouldn't. She looked at him for a moment, then signed the 4th-day check. The deed arrived by certified mail that afternoon. Elijah stood beside the road while the carrier handed him the envelope. His name appeared on the recorded instrument, followed by the legal description of the greenhouse parcel. He read it inside the workroom, then placed it beside the certified service memorandum. The greenhouse was no longer waiting on the estate. Morgan no longer represented it. Hunter couldn't point to an unfinished transfer and tell Elijah to wait. He emailed the deed to the cooperative and to Isaac. The cooperative replied with available dates for controlled access to the service valve. Isaac's office requested the plat, easement, service memorandum, Julia's log entry, and Elijah's proposed test locations. Elijah sent everything in one file. Isaac replied that the old drawing was usable for planning, but not enough to verify the present route. Road widening, repairs, or unrecorded field changes could have moved or abandoned the pipe. He would perform one location and flow test after coordinating access with the cooperative. The earliest date when all three could meet was 12 days away. Elijah accepted it. He marked the date on the workroom calendar, then called Dawn. The deed recorded, he said. Good. The cooperative approved access. The engineer is scheduled. Better, 12 days. That's not better. It's the first available date. Then keep testing what you have. At the end of the 10-day handling trial, Dawn returned with empty nursery racks. Elijah closed the irrigation valve and carried the trays outside one at a time. The rosemary stood upright, with no mixed labels and no lost cells. 2 lavender cells showed leaf damage from the cracked nozzle, but their new growth was clean. Dawn checked the roots, counted the trays, and compared them with the original sheet. You passed the handling test, she said. Even with the 2 damaged cells, you identified the cause and corrected it. Does that count as the first trial delivery? No. You didn't propagate these. Elijah had expected that answer. When do I get the next material? When the test proves water access. The draft says 2 trial deliveries before the full season. It does. So, let me start the first one. Dawn looked toward the road. With a line that loses pressure, with 4 benches and 2 zones that held for 10 days, you'll be risking your labor. That's mine to risk. And my plant material. I'll pay for it. You don't have money to waste. I'm not asking you to give it to me. That stopped her. Elijah took out the propagation list he'd prepared. He had chosen varieties the greenhouse could handle in its current temperature range. He had calculated bench space, expected losses, and delivery timing. Dawn read the pages on the hood of her pickup. You used Julia's mix for the rosemary, she said. I changed the perlite ratio. Her summer note said it stayed wet here. Dawn turned the page. You need bottom heat for these. I removed them from the first trial. She checked his numbers twice. I'll sell you enough stock for 2 benches, she said. Wholesale price. Payment in 30 days. Put it in writing. Dawn took out her clipboard. While she wrote the invoice, a dark vehicle stopped near the chained entrance. Morgan sat behind the wheel. Hunter was beside her. They could see the loaded nursery racks, the 4 working benches, the signed county sheet in the window, and Dawn writing beside Elijah's crop plan. Morgan didn't get out. Hunter lifted his phone and took a photograph from the road. Then Morgan backed away from the gate and drove toward Guthrie. Dawn watched the vehicle disappear. "That wasn't a social call," she said. "No." "Did they know about the supply agreement?" "They knew you were considering buying plants." "That's not what I asked." "They don't know the amount or the terms." Dawn finished the invoice and handed Elijah his copy. "Keep it that way until the water test." He loaded 2 trays of rosemary stock and 2 of lavender into the South Bay. Dawn showed him where to cut, how many nodes to leave, and which stems were too soft to use. Then she returned to the nursery. Elijah worked until dark. He filled the first bench with clean trays, measured the growing mix, and took each cutting with Julia's shears. The work was slower than equipment repair. A loose clamp announced itself. A bad cutting looked healthy until it didn't. By 10, he had filled half the bench. He opened the first irrigation zone. Nothing happened. The pipe didn't knock. The gauge didn't move. Elijah closed the valve, waited, and opened it again. No tremor came through the metal. He checked the repaired coupling and every manual shutoff. All were in the correct position. He walked to Cedar Ridge Road with a flashlight. The yellow marker remained in place. Across the pavement, a new orange tag hung from the cooperative service box. "Service closed. Contact office." He called the emergency number printed on the tag. The answering service took his information. A cooperative supervisor returned the call 20 minutes later. "The irrigation entry was placed on hold this afternoon," the supervisor said. "Why?" "We received a report of unbilled flow from a dormant service." "From who?" "I can't give you that." "I have a test scheduled with your office. I see the appointment. That's for controlled access and location work, not regular use." "I didn't know the line was connected." "You've been opening the private valve for testing." Water was still moving through the service. Elijah looked back at the greenhouse. The cuttings were waiting in dry mix. "What do I need to reopen it?" "A current account, ownership verification, deposit, and payment for estimated recent use." "How do you estimate use without a working meter?" "The field office will inspect the service box." "When?" "Within 5 business days. My engineer is scheduled before that." "Your appointment is now pending." Elijah held the phone tighter. The deed and service memorandum were already approved for a controlled test. "We received additional information questioning the transfer." "From the estate?" "I can't discuss another customer's communication. It isn't their service. It runs with my parcel. That's what we need to confirm." The supervisor gave him a case number and an office appointment for the next morning. Elijah ended the call. He filled 2 clean buckets from the nursery's employee shower after calling Dawn for permission. She met him at the loading entrance in sweatpants and work boots. "They closed it?" she asked. "This afternoon." "After Morgan and Hunter left?" "Yes." Dawn turned off the hose when the second bucket was full. "The stock can come back with me. I already cut half of it. Then bring the cuttings. I can water by hand, for 1 night, for as long as I need." "That isn't dependable production." "I know." Dawn stood with one hand on the hose. "Did you open that service before you had an account?" "I opened a greenhouse valve on my property. I didn't know where it was supplied. You knew before today that it might be cooperative water. I had an appointment to test it. You also kept using it." Elijah didn't answer. The distinction he'd been relying on sounded weaker when Dawn said it aloud. He had treated the pressure as something the greenhouse already possessed. He hadn't asked who was measuring it or paying for it. Dawn looked at the buckets. "Take enough water to protect tonight's cuttings. Tomorrow, we decide whether the trial continues." He carried the buckets to his truck. At the greenhouse, he watered each cell with a measuring cup. It took an hour. He logged the source as hauled nursery water and wrote service closed beneath the irrigation readings. He slept badly. At 8 the next morning, Morgan called. "Elijah, mister. Bell wants us to meet. Did you report the water service?" "I asked him to review the transfer." "Did you contact the cooperative?" "I sent them a copy of my request." "Why?" "Because you're using estate property to start a business before we know whether the distribution was fair. The greenhouse isn't estate property anymore. That's what needs review. You signed the transfer, as representative, based on the values we understood at the time. You understood the greenhouse was a liability. So did you." Elijah sat on the edge of the cot. "I chose it anyway. You chose a collapsed structure because of Grandma. None of us knew it had a working utility attached. It had a recorded service memorandum. The estate could have found it, and you didn't know about it when you signed. I know that matters. To what? 2. Whether everyone understood the choice. Hunter believes the parcel may affect the development value. Hunter believes everything affects his sale. Morgan lowered her voice. There's a substantial business opportunity here. She knew more than she had the day before, though not how much. Did you call Dawn? Elijah asked. I asked whether she was entering an agreement involving estate assets. It isn't an estate asset. She wouldn't discuss it. Good. You're acting like I did this to hurt you. You contacted my customer and had my water closed. I asked for a review. The cooperative made its own decision. You knew what would happen. Morgan didn't deny it. Mr. Bell can meet at 11, she said. I'll be at the cooperative. Elijah, ignoring this won't make it go away. I'm not ignoring it. I'm opening an account for my property. He ended the call. The cooperative office was a low brick building east of Guthrie. Elijah brought the deed, certified easement, service memorandum, county inspection sheet, and Julia's maintenance log. A customer representative copied each document. She confirmed the deed matched the parcel named in the service memorandum. The transfer question came from the person who signed as a state representative, she said. We need our manager to review it. How long? Usually a few days. My location test is scheduled, I understand. No, you see it on the screen. I have an engineer booked, plant material in the greenhouse, and a service your field office shut without calling me. The representative stopped typing. Elijah kept his voice level. What can I do today? She turned the monitor slightly and showed him the requirements. He could pay the account deposit and estimated use charge. He could also sign a request accepting the cost of a supervised test, even if no usable flow was found. The manager could then decide whether the recorded documents were sufficient without waiting for the estate review. If I pay and the manager says no, he asked. The account deposit is refundable. The field and test fees aren't. How much? She wrote the total on a printed estimate. It was almost everything Elijah had left after the steel payment. He asked for 10 minutes and went outside. Hunter was waiting beside Elijah's truck. You're following me now? Elijah asked. Morgan said you'd come here. She's at Mr. Bell's? She will be. What do you want? Hunter held out a folder. The developer will take the greenhouse parcel as part of the larger sale. You'll get $25,000 at closing. Elijah didn't touch the folder. That's more than Morgan offered, Hunter said. And you get your road package. Yes. That's how transactions work. Both sides get something. What happens to the greenhouse? It comes down. The irrigation service? Released or relocated. Released means ended. If the buyer doesn't need it. Elijah looked toward Cedar Ridge Road. From the cooperative office, he couldn't see Julia's yellow marker or the standing South Bay. He could see the figure Hunter had written on the first page. $25,000 would clear his remaining debt, replace the truck tires, and leave enough for a deposit on a better apartment. It would also make every current problem belong to someone else. Hunter saw him reading. You don't have to prove anything, he said. Take the money. Dawn can keep buying from her current supplier. Morgan gets the estate settled. I closed the land package. Nobody spends the next year fighting over a pipe. Elijah looked at him. You reported the unbilled flow. I told the cooperative there was a disputed line. You saw the water from the road. I saw you building a business around something nobody had reviewed, so you shut it down. I protected the sale. There it was. Hunter didn't think he'd acted cruelly. He thought he had moved an obstacle before it became expensive. Elijah handed back the folder. No. Hunter didn't take it. You haven't even heard the closing terms. I heard what happens to the greenhouse. It's steel and plastic. It's mine. Then pay for it. Elijah placed the folder on the hood of Hunter's vehicle. That's what I'm doing. Inside, he paid the cooperative charges. The customer representative stamped the receipt and took it to the manager. Elijah waited beneath a clock that ran 3 minutes slow. 20 minutes later, she returned. The recorded deed and service memorandum are sufficient to open the account provisionally, she said. The valve remains closed except for the supervised location and flow test. If the estate obtains a court order, that changes. A request for review by itself doesn't. Does my appointment stay scheduled? If your engineer confirms. Elijah emailed the receipt and provisional approval to Isaac. The reply came before he left the building. Appointment confirmed. Dawn called while he was driving back. I can't extend wholesale credit while the ownership objection is open, she said. That would put my nursery into your family dispute. I understand. You can return the unused stock. I cut half. Then I'll take back the uncut trays. The rest are yours at the invoiced price. I'll pay it. When? From the first repair job I can pick up. There was silence. Yes. With hauled water? Until the supervised test. That won't count toward dependable access. I know. It counts toward whether I can do the work. Dawn let out a breath. Bring the uncut trays by 5. Elijah returned them. He kept the cuttings, the invoice, and the obligation. That evening, he borrowed 2 lidded water drums from Todd and filled them at a paid public tap. Todd helped him secure them in the truck bed, but didn't ask what Hunter had offered. At the greenhouse, Elijah carried water from the drums to the benches. His shoulders hurt before the first zone was finished. He kept going until every cell had the measured amount. Then he placed the cooperative receipt beneath the recorded plat and circled the test date on the calendar. The water right had already cost him his savings, Dawn's credit, and whatever remained of Morgan's trust. Elijah turned off the workroom light, left the small fan running over the cuttings, and accepted that proving it would cost more. The cuttings were still upright the next morning. Elijah checked every tray before drinking coffee. 2 cells had settled lower than the others, so he firmed the mix around them and recorded the correction. The hauled water left a faint mineral ring on the trays. It was inconvenient, expensive, and slow, but it kept the trial alive. At 9, Mr. Bell called. Morgan requested a formal estate conference, he said. Is the deed still mine? Yes. Is she asking a court to change that? Not at this time. Then what's the conference for? To determine whether there's a resolution that avoids further action. Elijah looked at the buckets beside the bench. She had the service shut. I'm aware. Hunter offered to buy the parcel for his development sale. I'm aware of that too. Did they tell you before they made the offer? Mr. Bell paused. Come at 2. Bring your deed and the records you found. I sent copies. Bring them anyway. The conference room looked the same as it had when Elijah chose the parcel. Morgan sat in her previous chair. Hunter stood near the window instead of sitting. He had a folder open on the table. Elijah placed his documents in front of him and remained standing. Mr. Bell closed the door. The purpose today is narrow. Morgan has questioned whether the estate transfer should be reviewed because the irrigation service wasn't considered when the assets were distributed. It was recorded 28 years ago, Elijah said. Morgan pressed her hands together. That doesn't mean any of us knew it worked. You didn't check. Neither did you. I chose the parcel without knowing. That's my point. You thought you were making an emotional choice. Hunter and I thought the property was a liability. Mr. Bell lifted one hand. The election form didn't guarantee values. It offered Elijah either a fixed cash settlement or the parcel in its existing condition. He selected the parcel. The estate transferred it. The deed recorded. Morgan looked at him. So, none of this matters? It matters to the family and to any future arrangement you choose to make. It doesn't automatically cancel the deed. Hunter sat down. What would cancel it? Elijah could agree to reconvey. Otherwise, someone would need to establish a legal basis and obtain an order. We were relying on incomplete information, Morgan said. So was I, Elijah replied. You found the information because you got the property. I found it because I cleared broken benches, fixed the valve, found Grandma's log, searched the road, and requested the old records. You had Todd and Dawn helping you. They helped because I was doing the work. Morgan looked away. She wasn't used to hearing the difference stated. Hunter slid a paper across the table. There's another option. Elijah keeps ownership, but grants the development group control over the parcel for planning. If the water proves useful, we value it as part of the total project. He receives a percentage. Control means what? Elijah asked. Approval over contracts, access, improvements, and any water use that affects surrounding land. So I keep the deed, and you decide what I do. During the development period, how long? Up to 4 years. No, you haven't read the percentage. I read the control terms. Hunter tapped the page. You're building 4 benches inside a damaged greenhouse. I'm putting together a land transaction worth enough to solve this properly. What does properly mean? New utilities, road improvements, commercial structures. And the greenhouse? If it fits the plan, it stays in some form. Elijah, buildings change. Elijah pushed the paper back. No. Morgan turned toward him. You won't sell, you won't share control, and you won't pause Dawn's agreement. What are you willing to do? Prove the service, and after that, run the greenhouse. With no money. With a customer. You don't have a signed contract. Not yet. Hunter leaned forward. What's it worth? Elijah didn't answer. That's what this is really about, Hunter said. You're hiding a contract amount while accusing us of missing records. The amount is conditional on work I haven't completed and water I haven't proven. So, there is an amount. There is a draft between Dawn and me. It's not part of Julia's estate. Morgan's eyes settled on Elijah. If it depends on property from the estate, we have a right to know. No. You had a right to inspect the estate before transferring it. You don't have a right to my future business. The words changed something in the room. Morgan sat back. Hunter stopped tapping the folder. Mr. Bell looked down at the deed, giving all three of them a moment without pretending he hadn't heard. Morgan spoke first. You've never talked to me like this. You've never asked for control of something I own. I'm trying to keep this family from turning into people who communicate through certified mail. You contacted my water provider before you called me. I knew what you'd say. That doesn't make it better. Mr. Bell opened the service memorandum. The cooperative has accepted Elijah's recorded deed and opened a provisional account. I spoke with their manager this morning at Morgan's request. Their position is that the service remains closed except for the scheduled test. They'll follow the result and their service rules unless directed otherwise by a court. Morgan's shoulders dropped slightly. The cooperative hadn't given her what she wanted. Mr. Bell continued. The estate election remains completed. I will provide certified estate copies if any party asks. I won't state that Elijah misunderstood a document whose terms he read and signed. He wasn't protecting Elijah. He was refusing to change a finished act because its result had become inconvenient. Hunter closed his folder. Then we're done. No, Elijah said. The test is in 3 days. Hunter looked at him. I want both of you there. Morgan frowned. Why? So you can see what is tested, where it runs, and what the result is. You don't owe us that, she said. I know. Then why invite us? Because if it works, I don't want another call made behind me. If it fails, I don't want you saying I hid that either. Hunter studied him. Who else will be there? Isaac, the cooperative field operator, Dawn, and Todd. That sounds like an audience. It's the people who have a reason to know. Morgan glanced at Mr. Bell. Do you need to attend? No. The deed and recorded estate documents speak for themselves. Elijah wrote the time on a piece of paper and placed it between Morgan and Hunter. The gate opens 20 minutes before the test, he said. It closes when we finish. Hunter took the paper. If the line crosses land in my sale package, I'll object. The recorded easement shows a roadside route. The drawing is old. That's why we're testing it. And if it's somewhere else, then Isaac records where it is. Hunter stood. You sound very sure. I'm sure about the next step. Outside the office, Morgan caught up with Elijah on the stairs. You invited us to watch you prove Grandma left you something valuable. I invited you to watch a water test. You know how that will look? To who? To Hunter. To me. Elijah stopped on the landing. You're worried it will look like she chose me. Morgan's face changed. Julia had loved her. Elijah knew that. She had attended Morgan's college graduation, sat through her long wedding rehearsal, and helped her replace the roof after a hailstorm. Morgan hadn't been neglected, but Julia's clear claim on Elijah had always felt to Morgan like a correction aimed at the rest of them. She didn't have to choose one of us, Elijah said. That's easy for you to say now. No, it isn't. Morgan held the stair rail. I did everything she asked at the end. I know. I drove her to appointments. I handled her medication. I cleaned the house when she couldn't. I know that too. And she gave you the one thing she kept from us. She offered me a collapsed greenhouse with a water service nobody knew about. She left the log in a recycle box at the house. If you'd opened it, you could have found the same record. Morgan looked toward the lobby. I did open the box, she said. You saw an old notebook. I saw dozens of old notebooks. She wrote down everything. Grocery prices, rainfall, which tomatoes split. And you decided none of it mattered. Morgan's eyes returned to him. I decided I couldn't keep every piece of paper because she touched it. Elijah nodded. That's fair. She hadn't expected agreement. But you don't get to decide the greenhouse records are worthless after I prove they aren't, he said. That part is over. He continued down the stairs. At the greenhouse, Todd was waiting beside the yellow marker. He had brought a hand shovel and a roll of bright flags. "Thought we could clear the test route," he said. "We can clear the west side." Isaac said not to dig near the road. Todd pushed a flag beside the marker. "You tell Morgan and Hunter, they're coming." "Why?" "I want them to see it." Todd gave him a long look. "You could test it first. That would defeat the point. You could also send that plat to Hunter's developer. Let them know he's promising clean access where there's a recorded irrigation route. I'm not doing that. It might get him off your back. Or damage a sale before I know whether my pipe affects it. He shut your water. I'm opening it the right way." Todd drove the shovel into the soft soil beside the greenhouse wall. "Julia would have sent the plat." "No, she wouldn't. You knew her 6 years. You worked for her longer. Did she ever ruin somebody else's deal because she was angry?" Todd rested both hands on the shovel. "She made people nervous." "That isn't the same." "No." Elijah marked the visible path between the greenhouse pipe and road edge post. They removed weeds and loose debris, leaving the soil undisturbed for the locator. Todd found a corroded metal tag on the greenhouse riser. He cleaned it with his thumb. The stamped service number matched the final digits on Julia's memorandum. That removed one uncertainty. The pipe inside the greenhouse belonged to the recorded irrigation installation. It still didn't prove where the buried section ran or whether controlled flow could reach the beds at a usable rate. Elijah photographed the tag and sent it to Isaac. Isaac replied with instructions. The greenhouse valve had to remain closed. No one was to disturb the road shoulder. He would place the locator on the exposed riser, trace the conductive signal toward the road, then coordinate controlled flow from the cooperative box. Elijah printed the instructions and taped them beside the county sheet. Dawn arrived after closing her nursery. She checked the cuttings and signed the daily condition line. Only one cell had failed. "Are Morgan and Hunter definitely coming?" she asked. "They have the time. That wasn't my question." "I think they will. If the test works, I'm prepared to sign after I review Isaac's report." "In front of them?" "That's where I conduct business. Whoever watches is their concern." Elijah looked at the unsigned draft on the desk. Once Dawn signed it, Morgan and Hunter would know the greenhouse had become a real operation. There would be no return to the old arrangement where Elijah stayed close by, asking for little. He placed copies of the deed, plat, easement, service memorandum, maintenance entry, and cooperative approval into separate folders for Morgan and Hunter. Then he locked the originals in Julia's long cabinet and put the brass key on his own key ring. The morning of the test was clear and already warm. Elijah opened the gate 20 minutes early. He set the document folders on the workroom desk, checked the greenhouse valve, and left it closed. Todd arrived first. He brought his folding chair but didn't open it. Dawn came next. She carried the contract in a brown envelope and placed it beside the folders without mentioning it. Morgan and Hunter arrived together. Morgan walked into the south bay and looked at the 4 benches. The cuttings stood in straight labeled rows beneath the open vent. Hunter stayed outside. "Where's the engineer?" he asked. "On his way," Elijah said. "And the cooperative?" "Same." Hunter checked his watch. "If this test doesn't establish a legal connection, the service stays closed. The cooperative decides that. The estate objection still exists. Morgan's request exists." Mr. Bell explained the difference. Morgan looked at the cuttings. "We haven't decided what to do next." Elijah handed her a folder. "Everything being used today is in there." She opened it, but didn't take anything out. Hunter refused his copy. "I've seen the plat. You haven't seen the deed, easement, service memorandum, and matching number together. I know what they say." "Then take the folder." Hunter left it on the desk. Isaac arrived in a white utility vehicle carrying a receiver, a transmitter case, 2 gauges, and a coil of cable. He introduced himself to each person, then asked who owned the parcel. Elijah handed him the recorded deed. Hunter stepped forward. "The ownership is under estate review." Isaac read the first page. "Is there a court order restricting access or testing?" "No," Elijah said. Morgan answered at the same time. "Not yet." Isaac looked from one to the other. "The cooperative approved a supervised test for the recorded owner," he said. "That's the scope of my work. I'm locating an existing irrigation installation and measuring flow. I'm not resolving a family dispute." The cooperative field operator arrived a few minutes later. She checked Elijah's account receipt and the service memorandum. Then she unlocked the box east of Cedar Ridge Road. Hunter crossed his arms. That box could serve any old line in this area. The operator looked inside. It contains one irrigation valve with the service number on Mr. Meyer's memorandum. That doesn't prove where the pipe goes. No, Isaac said. That's what the location test is for. He began at the greenhouse riser. The metal service tag Todd had cleaned was attached to a tracer connection. Isaac checked its number against the memorandum, then connected the transmitter. A steady tone sounded from his receiver. He moved away from the greenhouse in short steps. The receiver stayed over a narrow path through the property. Every few feet, he placed a small blue flag. The line went directly toward Julia's yellow marker. Todd stood beside Elijah, keeping his hands in his pockets. She put the marker exactly over it, he said. Isaac paused at the road shoulder and adjusted the receiver. He walked several feet north, then south, checking for other buried signals. Hunter followed him. There are public utilities along this road. You could be reading one of those. The tracer signal is set to a frequency I'm transmitting from the greenhouse connection, Isaac said. Signals bleed. They can. That's why I'm checking depth and direction. Hunter glanced toward Morgan. He still believed the test would reveal uncertainty large enough to preserve his version. The greenhouse had been a broken structure. The water had been an unbilled accident. Elijah had mistaken repair work for ownership, and everyone would eventually return to the practical sale Hunter had offered. Isaac walked to the west edge of the pavement. The receiver tone remained steady. He stepped into the road after the cooperative operator stopped traffic from one direction and Todd watched the other. Isaac moved across the asphalt, following the signal. At the center of Cedar Ridge Road, he marked a point with blue chalk. Hunter shook his head. You can't mark a route from one electronic signal and call it proven. I haven't, Isaac said. He continued across the road. The signal led through the east shoulder and ended at the cooperative box. Isaac checked the depth again, then disconnected the transmitter at the greenhouse. The receiver tone disappeared. He reconnected it. The same route returned. Isaac walked back to the center of the road and pointed at the chalk mark. The tracer installed with the private irrigation pipe runs from the greenhouse riser beneath Cedar Ridge Road to this service box. Its position matches the recorded plat within normal field tolerance. Nobody spoke. A car approached, so they cleared the road. Morgan stood beside Julia's marker. She looked from the flags to the box across the pavement. The old drawing was no longer an abstract line on yellow paper. It had a place under their feet. Hunter wasn't finished. A tracer can remain after a pipe fails, he said. You still don't know whether water reaches the greenhouse. That's correct, Isaac replied. The cooperative operator attached a temporary meter at the source valve. Isaac installed one gauge at the service box and another inside the south bay. He checked that the greenhouse valve was closed, then asked Elijah where he wanted the first flow measured. At the main riser, Elijah said. Isaac opened the test port beside the greenhouse valve and connected a clear discharge hose. Its end rested inside a marked container. The operator called from across the road. Source ready. Isaac looked at Elijah. This will be controlled from the cooperative side. Don't touch the greenhouse valve until I ask. Elijah nodded. Hunter turned to Dawn. You're planning to sign based on this? I'm planning to sign based on a usable, verified service and Elijah meeting my other requirements. He carried water for 10 days. He kept the trial alive for 10 days. That isn't commercial production. No. It's why the contract has trial deliveries. Morgan opened her folder at last. She found the service memorandum and read the paragraph tying availability to the greenhouse parcel. Elijah didn't buy this service, she said. No, Dawn replied. Julia did. And none of us knew. Dawn looked toward the greenhouse. Somebody knew enough to keep her log. The operator began opening the cooperative valve. The source gauge rose. For several seconds, nothing happened inside the greenhouse. Elijah heard the small fan moving air over the cuttings. He heard a truck pass beyond the cottonwoods. Then the buried pipe knocked beneath the concrete. The clear hose jumped. Water pushed out in a cloudy burst, cleared, and began flowing steadily into the container. Todd let out one breath and looked down. Isaac watched the gauge. Pressure is holding. I'm starting the measured run. He timed the flow, checked both gauges, and asked the operator to increase the source in controlled steps. Water continued moving beneath the road and into the greenhouse without a pressure drop. After the final measurement, Isaac closed the test port. Open the south irrigation zone, he told Elijah. Elijah turned the same valve he had touched when he first entered the workroom. This time, the pipe didn't offer a faint tremor. It filled with a firm, even movement. The first 6 heads rose, then the 7th. Water reached the second pair of benches, continued through the restored bed, and held. Isaac checked the interior gauge while the operator read the temporary meter across the road. "How much can it support?" Dawn asked. "At this pressure and measured rate, it can supply the operating South Bay in normal irrigation zones," Isaac said. "Expansion would require a design schedule and confirmation of the remaining internal lines. The service itself is usable." "And the route?" Morgan asked. "The physical route matches the recorded irrigation easement. The source service number matches the memorandum and the greenhouse riser tag." Hunter's face had gone still. "Could it be moved?" "That isn't part of my test. Could the cooperative release it for development?" The operator answered. "Not without the parcel owner's authorization and compliance with the recorded service terms." Every person looked at Elijah. Nothing about him had changed in the last minute. His shirt was damp from the heat. Dirt marked both knees of his work trousers. His remaining money was almost gone. But Hunter could no longer treat Elijah's consent as a detail that would come later. Morgan closed the folder. The estate didn't know. Elijah turned off the irrigation zone. Water settled inside the line. "You knew Grandma gave me the parcel," he said. "This is part of the parcel." Morgan looked at the flags crossing the road. She had believed the service would become a reason to reopen the choice. Instead, it had confirmed why the choice was finished. Hunter picked up the folder he had refused earlier. "I want the full test report." "You'll get a copy," Elijah said. Isaac removed the gauges and disconnected the tracer. He showed Elijah the field notes before placing them in his case. "I'll issue the signed report with the route map and measured flow," he said. "Based on today's test, the private irrigation line is intact between the cooperative service and this greenhouse riser. The cooperative operator removed the temporary meter and installed the account seal. The service can remain active under your provisional account. Regular billing begins today." She handed Elijah the only customer key. Then she locked the outer box and left. Isaac gathered the flags, except those Elijah asked to keep at the property edges. He packed his equipment, shook Elijah's hand, and drove away. His work had been one test. It had answered one question. Todd watched his vehicle leave, then looked at Morgan and Hunter. Elijah looked at him. Todd's words were blunt, but they didn't feel like celebration. They sounded like a fact the family could no longer edit. Dawn carried the brown envelope into the workroom. She placed the supply agreement on Julia's old desk. The water condition is satisfied. The stabilization condition is satisfied. The 2 trial deliveries still apply before full seasonal orders. "I understand," Elijah said. "The total is $240,000 across 5 seasons. That's purchase revenue, not profit. You cover labor, materials, power, delivery, losses, and taxes." "I understand that too." Morgan stared at the first page. She hadn't known the amount. Hunter stepped closer and read it over her shoulder. Dawn held out a pen. "The agreement is between Peterson Nursery and Elijah Meyer, owner and operator of this greenhouse. No estate, no development group." Hunter spoke before Elijah could sign. "If that contract depends on road access or water crossing, the development plan has an interest." "No," Elijah said. "You haven't reviewed the effect on surrounding land. The pipe follows its recorded easement. The buyer may still object." "The buyer doesn't own my parcel." Morgan touched Elijah's arm. "Wait. We should talk before you commit." He looked at her hand until she removed it. "You had the water closed before talking to me," he said. "You don't get to ask me to wait now." Elijah signed the agreement. Dawn signed beneath him and gave him one original. She kept the other. The $240,000 wasn't sitting in an account. It would arrive only as Elijah produced acceptable plants over 5 seasons. The signature gave him work, not rescue. Hunter read the signed first page again. "This changes my sale," he said. Elijah put his copy inside Julia's long cabinet. "Then change your sale." He locked the cabinet, placed the key back on his ring, and opened the south irrigation zone. Water moved through every restored head, while Morgan and Hunter stood inside the greenhouse they had expected him to abandon. Hunter walked to the open end of the South Bay and called someone from his phone. He kept his voice low, but the greenhouse carried sound. "No, don't send the revised access sheet yet," he said. "I need to remove one parcel and check the road utility language." Morgan remained beside the wet beds. Dawn packed her clipboard and pressure gauge. "I'll send the first propagation order tomorrow," Dawn told Elijah. "Your delivery date doesn't move because today went well." "I know. And the invoice for the stock you kept is still due." "I know that too." She looked toward Morgan. "Goodbye, Morgan." Morgan nodded. Dawn? There had once been an easier relationship between them, built from years of buying flowers for Julia and exchanging brief conversations at the nursery. That ease was gone. Dawn didn't make a speech about it. She took her contract and left. Todd began gathering the empty water drums. "You don't have to do that now," Elijah said. "I borrowed them from a friend. I thought they were yours. I said I borrowed them." "When?" "Before I brought them." Todd lifted one end. Water working doesn't unload a truck. Elijah took the other end. They secured both drums while Hunter finished his call. Todd gave Elijah a quiet nod, got into his pickup, and drove away. Morgan came out holding the unsigned copy of Hunter's control proposal. "We need 10 minutes, she said. "We've had more than 10. This is different now." "Yes." Hunter put his phone away. "The eastern landowners won't accept an open utility issue under the road." "It isn't open," Elijah said. Isaac located it. "It's open for development planning. If the road entrance changes, the line may need protection or relocation. Then your buyer can plan around the recorded easement. That costs money, not mine." Hunter stared at him. "You're benefiting from a system Grandma paid for while the rest of the estate carries the cost of settling everything else. I paid the account charges, the test fees, the engineer, and the repairs. You paid to activate it, you didn't install it. Neither did you." Morgan stepped between them. "Stop." Hunter turned to her. "You wanted to talk. Talk." She looked at Elijah. "Withdraw from the estate review isn't the right phrase, because Mr. Bell says it has no effect unless I take further action." "Then take no further action. I'm willing to put that in writing if we agree on the contract." Elijah waited. Morgan continued. "You keep the greenhouse. Hunter removes it from the development parcel. In exchange, a management company handles the Dawn agreement. What management company? One we form. With who in control? I handle the payments and records. Hunter handles land and delivery issues. You handle production." Elijah almost asked whether she heard herself. Instead, he let her finish. "You haven't run a business before," Morgan said. "The contract is large enough that mistakes matter. We could protect it. And take what percentage? We'd determine that after reviewing costs." "No. You need bookkeeping. I can hire bookkeeping. You need delivery planning. I can arrange delivery. You don't even have safe tires." That landed because it was true. Elijah looked at Morgan. "My truck needs tires. That doesn't give you my business. I'm offering help. You're offering to stop challenging my property if I give you control of what it produces." Morgan's eyes hardened. "You make everything I say sound ugly. I'm repeating the terms." Hunter took the proposal from her. "Forget it. Let him find out what revenue means after expenses." "I plan to," Elijah said. Hunter folded the paper once. "My buyer may pursue costs if the easement delays the sale. Send anything through the proper contact. Mr. Bell?" "No, me." That answer changed Hunter's expression. Elijah was no longer using Julia, the estate, or the attorney as a doorway between them. Elijah handed both of them the prepared folders. "These are copies of the deed, easement, service memorandum, and test documents. Isaac's signed report will be added when it arrives. You can protect your sale using the actual route. You don't get control of the greenhouse, the water account, or Dawn's contract." Morgan held the folder against her chest. "And the family? That's separate, is it?" "It has to be." She waited for him to explain what she could do to restore it. Elijah didn't. For once, he wasn't going to design her apology and carry it back to himself. Hunter opened his vehicle. "I'll withdraw the parcel from the development package. Send me the revised map when it's done. That's business." "Yes." Hunter got in without saying goodbye. Morgan stayed a moment longer. "I did take care of Grandma. I know you did. I loved her. I know. And I didn't throw away that log on purpose. I know that too." She looked at the greenhouse around them. "That doesn't seem to change anything. It changes what I believe you meant. It doesn't change what you did after we found the water." Morgan nodded once. It was a small movement, and it cost her. "What happens now?" she asked. "You stop contacting my customers and utilities. You don't discuss my property with Hunter's buyers. If you want to call me about dinner or grandma's things, call. If the call turns into business, I end it. That sounds cold. It sounds clear. Morgan carried the folder to her car. 3 days later, Isaac's signed report arrived. Elijah sent copies to Morgan, Hunter, Dawn, the cooperative, and Mr. Bell. He kept the original in the locked cabinet. Hunter replied with a revised development map. The greenhouse parcel was absent. A note directed future road design to respect the recorded irrigation route. He didn't apologize. He didn't mention Julia. He had withdrawn because the proof made the parcel more expensive to fight than to leave alone. Elijah printed the map and filed it. Dawn's first propagation order required twice as many cuttings as the handling test. She delivered the stock at 7 in the morning and inspected the work area before unloading. "You need another circulation fan," she said. I repaired the wall fan. 1 fan moves air. 2 fans keep the far bench from holding moisture. I can buy one after the first trial payment. You can't risk my material until the first payment. Elijah checked the equipment cards. One missing fan had shared a model number with an older unit stored behind the collapsed center. Todd remembered removing it years earlier. They found it beneath a sheet of plastic. The housing was dented, but the motor turned. Elijah replaced the bearings and rewired the cord. By afternoon, air moved across both ends of the South Bay. Dawn held a strip of survey ribbon near the last bench and watched it lift. "That works," she said. She signed the setup check. Elijah paid Todd for the retrieval and lifting work. Todd accepted the full amount this time. "You'll need somebody checking irrigation when you deliver," Todd said. "I was going to ask." "Ask what?" "Seasonal maintenance, paid hours. You choose which days you can work." Todd looked at the restored heads. "I don't climb, I know. I don't start before 9. Dawn said you don't start before 10. Dawn talks too much. Can you start at 9:30? Todd considered it. During spring, they shook hands. Morgan returned the following Saturday in a rented utility trailer. Elijah met her at the gate. 2 wooden propagation benches were strapped inside. Their legs had been removed and bundled beside them. "I found these behind Grandma's garden shed," she said. Hunter had marked them for disposal. Elijah touched one of the oak slats. Todd's initials were burned beneath the end rail. "You could have called," he said. "I thought bringing them was better." "It is." Morgan had also brought Julia's work clothes, folded in a clean cardboard box. She handed it to Elijah without saying they wouldn't fit her. They unloaded the benches together. Morgan carried the lighter legs. Elijah didn't tell her to stand aside, and she didn't try to organize the job. When the last piece rested inside the South Bay, she wiped her hands on her trousers. "I won't ask about the contract," she said. "I won't contact Dawn. I told Hunter any future estate question goes through you. Thank you. I'd like to come back sometime." "To the greenhouse?" "To see you." Elijah looked at her. "Call first." "I will. And if you come, the property isn't a family discussion. All right?" He didn't hug her. Morgan didn't ask him to. She left the trailer for the afternoon so he and Todd could reassemble the benches. After her car disappeared, Elijah opened the box of Julia's clothes. Her work apron wasn't there because it already hung beside the sink. The box held stained shirts, heavy socks, and a green cardigan she used to wear on cold mornings. At the bottom lay a packet of clean shop towels. Elijah took one out and began wiping dust from the returned oak slats. The dust came off in gray streaks. Todd arrived after lunch and examined both benches. One needed a new center support. The other had 3 loose slats and a leg that had split around an old screw. "I built these for Julia's seed trays," he said. "Can they carry nursery flats?" "With the support." They worked until evening. Elijah cut the centerpiece while Todd repaired the split leg with glue, bolts, and a steel strap. When they stood the benches beside the others, the South Bay finally held 4 full rows. Dawn's first propagation order filled them. For the next 3 weeks, Elijah checked temperature before sunrise and again after dark. He adjusted the vents by hand. He watered in separate zones and inspected the pipe after every run. The service bill arrived in his name, and he paid it before buying anything for the workroom. The first delivery wasn't perfect. Dawn inspected the trays on her nursery loading dock. She rejected 2 because their roots hadn't filled the cells evenly. A third tray had mixed labels in one corner. "I didn't mix those," Elijah said. "The labels are mixed. I know which plants they are. My employees shouldn't have to know what you meant," he wanted to argue. Instead, he removed the rejected trays from the invoice. What happens to them? He asked. You take them back and correct what you can. Do they count against the trial? They count as a result. That wasn't the answer he wanted. Dawn accepted the other trays and paid the reduced amount under the written terms. Elijah used part of the payment for 2 truck tires and the rest for growing mix, labels, and a second temperature sensor. Back at the greenhouse, he separated the mixed plants and changed his labeling system. Every variety received a different colored stake at the beginning and end of its row. Todd checked the rows before each planting because he hadn't been present when the first labels were mixed. Why am I checking this? Todd asked. Because you notice when things are out of order. I notice when people ask me to do unpaid office work. Elijah wrote 15 minutes on Todd's timesheet. That's better, Todd said. The second trial delivery left the greenhouse before dawn on a cool morning. Elijah secured the trays in the truck and arrived at Dawn's nursery before the customer gate opened. Dawn inspected roots, labels, moisture, and growth. She moved slowly enough that Elijah stopped trying to read her face. At the final tray, she signed the acceptance sheet. No rejected units, she said. Does that satisfy the second trial? It does. She handed him the seasonal order schedule. Now the quantities get larger. Elijah looked at the first full order. I'll need more covered space. Yes. And another person during delivery weeks. Yes. You knew that when you wrote this. I expected you to learn it before signing. He folded the schedule and put it in his work bag. Dawn looked at the truck. Those tires are new. The front too. The rear ones aren't. They're next. She didn't offer to buy them. She added a delivery safety requirement to the next worksheet. The county approved removal of the collapse center after Elijah submitted a new plan. He didn't rebuild all at once. Contract payments came after accepted deliveries, and each payment already had a job. First came the remaining tires, then replacement ribs for the center section, then clear roof panels and 2 efficient fans. Elijah kept the old yellow thermometer beside the workroom door, even after installing digital controls inside. Todd worked 3 mornings a week during spring. He checked filters, emitters, and valve packing. He complained about the timesheets, but completed every one. One morning, Elijah found him kneeling beside Julia's yellow road marker with fresh paint. That wasn't on today's list, Elijah said. Add it. How long? 20 minutes. It took you an hour. I spent 40 minutes finding my brush. Elijah wrote 1 hour. The irrigation line stayed on the recorded route. Isaac's map went into a protective sleeve beside the maintenance log. When county crews repaired the road shoulder, Elijah gave them the route copy before work began. They marked the crossing and left it undisturbed. Hunter's development sale continued without the greenhouse parcel. He sent one question about setback measurements through email. Elijah answered with the recorded map and nothing else. Hunter replied, received. He never asked to visit. Elijah never offered. Morgan called before Thanksgiving. I'm making Grandma's dressing, she said. I found her recipe, but it says enough sage. Do you know what that means? It means less than you think. That isn't a measurement. She used about a tablespoon for the big pan. Are you coming? Elijah looked at the delivery schedule on the wall. I can come after 2. I have irrigation checks in the morning. There was a brief pause. Morgan could have complained that he was putting the greenhouse first. Instead, she said, we'll eat at 3. At dinner, she asked about his truck and Todd's knees. She didn't ask about revenue, the contract, or the water service. When Hunter mentioned road access, Morgan said, that isn't dinner. Elijah stayed until the coffee was finished. Months later, she called again. I'm outside the gate, she said. Elijah looked through the greenhouse wall. Morgan stood beside her car, holding a covered dish. You remembered to call. I said I would. He opened the gate. She waited near the workroom while he finished watering. When he came out, she held up the dish. Chicken and noodles? I made too much. You never make too much. I made enough to bring some. He took it. Thank you. Morgan looked through the open bay. New growth covered the benches she had returned. Can I see? She asked. You can walk through. Don't touch the labels. I won't. She followed him between the beds. At the long cabinet, her eyes paused on the brass key attached to his belt. I was wrong about this place, she said. Yes. I was wrong about how I handled you too. Elijah checked a tray before answering. The leaves were dry and the stems stood straight. I'm not ready for us to act like nothing happened, he said. I know. We can have dinner. You can visit if you call. The greenhouse stays out of family decisions. All right. And if you contact Dawn or the cooperative again, visit stop. Morgan nodded. I understand. She came back the next month with empty canning jars that had belonged to Julia. She called first. She didn't bring paperwork, an offer, or a question about money. Elijah put the jars on the workroom shelf. Some held plant ties and spare nozzles. He kept two empty because Julia had always kept room for things she hadn't harvested yet. By the first full growing season, the greenhouse supplied Dawn with rosemary, lavender, salvia, and several hardy perennials. Elijah hired extra help only during delivery weeks and kept Todd on seasonal maintenance. He didn't spend contract revenue before the plants passed inspection. The rebuilt center section joined the South Bay before winter. Its new metal didn't match the old frame exactly. Elijah left the sound original ribs in place and replaced only what had failed. On cold mornings, condensation moved down the clear panels into the drainage channel he had opened on his first day. The workroom changed more slowly. He installed a compact shower, fed from a separate approved potable tank. He added a small refrigerator, a proper bed, and a table built from leftover oak slats. Julia's green mug stayed beside the sink. Her cardigan hung on the back of a chair for months before Elijah finally folded it into the long cabinet. He bought a framed photograph of Julia from Morgan, though she tried to give it to him. It came from the house, Elijah said. Put the money toward the estate expenses. Morgan accepted because he asked her to. The photograph showed Julia in the greenhouse, one hand resting on a propagation bench. Elijah hung it above the table. It was the first picture he had ever put on a wall he expected to keep. In spring, Dawn arrived for the largest delivery yet. She walked every row before the trays were loaded. You're short one flat of lavender, she said. It failed the root check. You could have delivered it. I might have accepted it. I wouldn't. Dawn marked the shortage and adjusted the invoice. You'll replace it next week? Yes. Then we're good. They loaded the truck together. Todd checked the irrigation zones while Elijah secured the racks. Morgan had left breakfast biscuits by the gate after calling ahead, and 3 remained wrapped in foil on the desk. Nobody asked Elijah to be grateful for being included. Nobody called his work a favor. When he needed help, he paid for work, traded fairly, or asked plainly. When someone offered care, he no longer searched first for the condition hidden behind it. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. That evening, Elijah returned from Dawn's nursery with empty racks and an accepted delivery sheet. Todd had logged the final irrigation check and gone home. Morgan had sent a message asking whether Sunday dinner should be at 2 or 3. Elijah answered 3, then put the phone away. He walked the rows once more. Water reached the farthest head with steady pressure. New cuttings stood beneath clean labels. The old yellow marker remained visible beyond the gate, and the pipe beneath Cedar Ridge Road carried the service Julia had protected for him to use. The workroom lamp shone through the window. Julia's green mug waited beside the sink, and Elijah's boots stood beneath the table. At dusk, Elijah closed the greenhouse door, while irrigation water moved through Julia's restored beds beside the lit workroom he now called home.